involvement. Now, more than ever, young people are saying, why are we doing this? And instead of getting upset or annoyed that they're always asking why, we should actually listen to the why right now. They're asking themselves, adults, are you giving me what I need for the adulthood that I will have? What they're asking for, are you giving me the skills that I need to transition into adulthood effectively? So this big box right here is skill building. So the big thing here in terms of creating a common language and a common approach is not just to work with schools, not just to work with parks and recreation or law enforcement or faith-based organizations, but to work with all of those services and systems together to create a community-wide language and approach. I'm going to hand the microphone back over to Superintendent Callahan, who will talk to you a little bit about how they're creating policies and procedures around this framework.
Thank you, Adrian.
Okay, so I'm going to pass around, and I have a couple of extra copies for members of the community as well. But it is our blueprint for student success in Western Placer. We have two goals in our district. The first one is that all students will graduate from college or from high school, college, and career ready. We want that all of our students have the choice to do whatever it is that they choose to do, whether it's go into an immediate career, whether it's to go to four-year university, trade school, two-year college, and get certifications, whatever that is, we want to make sure that they're prepared. And that all of our students and families are actively engaged in learning and in their school communities. And that's our second goal within our LCAP. And then we have our development framework, which you'll see on the handout that you're getting, is the youth development framework that Adrian just spoke to. I started in Western Placer in 2014 as the Assistant Sup of Ed Services. In my previous position, I was a high school principal for 6 years. At a school that within the first 4 weeks of me being principal, there was a gang fight and there was 400 students. Staff could not get through to break up the fight. And I was the fifth principal in 6 years at the school. We had students blowing out of classes every single day for all sorts of different discipline issues. We had fights on campus regularly, and we brought in the Youth Development Network to focus on our culture and climate and to provide the supports and opportunities for our youth and for our adults that serve them to change the environment at our school. We made, without doing anything related to skill building really, because in education, that's our whole purpose, right? We're supposed to teach the kids the standards. The reality is if you don't create the environments for them to be successful in learning the skills you're trying to teach them, so when we partnered with the Youth Development Network and started making the changes that we did, we saw more academic gains in our high school than any of the schools in our district and in our county. We were recognized by the state of California for decreasing our discipline more than any other school in the state of California in just 5 years. When I came to Western Placer and Adrian joined us, we started training staff across the district in the youth development framework. We have trainers now because their whole point is they want to get in and get out. So they come in, they train you, they train your people up, and then you sustain it yourself. And you put in these systems that are going to support being intentional around these supports and opportunities. And in the 9 years that I've been in the district, and it's not because of me, it's because of collective efforts for sure, we've made more gains as a district in academic achievement than any other district in Placer County. And it's not because we're doing anything significantly different around the academics. We've created the environments that are conducive to learning for our kids. COVID hit, and we're seeing certainly some impacts related to discipline for sure. And so we need this more than ever to reignite around this. And ultimately, we know that it's bigger than just us as a school district. We see the kids more than probably most of the organizations and even some of our families because they're with us all day. But we wholeheartedly believe as a school district, and I know you guys feel the same way, that it takes a village. And so we want to partner with the city to develop a youth master plan, bring stakeholders from our district, from the city, and organizations within the city that support our youth, and collectively establish some commitments that we want to make for our youth, and come up with a plan for how we can work together to train people who serve our youth, and to implement programs and start to streamline and align the things that we're doing, so that we can kind of work smarter and not harder. Because I think there's a lot of amazing work that's happening in our community, and talking more together, we can be a little more strategic about how we're ensuring that we're serving all the youth collectively together. So it's been a long journey for us in our district, but we have seen the gains, just like I saw in my previous district. Adrian has worked with other cities, and he's going to kind of close it out. And then Jason Price, one of our board members, is here and might say a few words just in terms of our district's commitment to supporting this regardless. So I'll have Adrian kind of talk about the process that we would go through to put together a master plan for our city.
Thank you, Carrie.
So as I mentioned earlier, the common language and common approach is everything. And the way we do that is we bring all key stakeholders together, and we go at it in terms of establishing that common language and a common approach. And so I know you all have a copy of the more intricate matters of creating a youth master plan, but I want to give you the chapters so that we can be on the same page around that. Chapter number 1 is bringing everyone through professional development together on discovering what are the supports and opportunities. I have never been someone that likes to go into community. Youth Development Network has never been an organization that goes into community and says, here's what's wrong with you. I think that's kind of bogus. I actually want to start off with the bright spots. Let's look at everything that's right as it relates to safety, as it relates to relationship building, as it relates to youth voice and choice, community involvement and skill building. And in that conversation, you find out that there's amazing youth development happening in places like faith-based organizations, in community-based organizations, in emancipation services, in law enforcement. We need to celebrate that. But we also need to get on the same page on what our targets are going to be for our young people. The second thing is we need to hear from our young people, and we need to hear from their families and guardians. How are you experiencing Lincoln? What else do you want from us so that we can make sure that we're creating this place where all of our young people can thrive and succeed, and parents, guardians feel supported? Data means everything to us. So in Woodland, and this is a copy of the way we did this in Woodland, the city of Woodland down the road, we surveyed close to 3,500 young people around these supports and opportunities, what was working, what was not. And then we also did listening circles with parents, with guardians, and with young people throughout the community. All that data guided our work, but we knew we were doing it from a place of not an outside agency saying, this is what you need, to more a community saying, this is what we're going to build together moving forward. That means everything, because you all are going to do the heavy lifting, right? We'll bring in the research, we'll bring in the facilitation, but there's going to be a commitment from the city to move this forward. I'll close out with this. You will, in about 1.5 years time, see a youth plan for the next 10 years. And in there, you will see the dashboards in there. We know this, we need to do this in concert. We need all systems and services working together. And we need to always be paying attention to the metrics, right? But to me, this is so much of a celebration about the work that you're doing already, and then just taking it to the next level so that our young people have what they need. And when someone moves away from Lincoln and moves out to the East Coast, they said, and they ask them, how did you get so sharp? Oh, I got it from this place called Lincoln. And it was a place where I got to play whatever I wanted to play. I got to learn what I wanted to learn. And the adults were always looking out for us and gave us what they needed. I hope that this helps in terms of understanding what this is going to look like over the next 1.5 years. And I definitely will be around to answer any questions in terms of the more technical aspects of it all. But I want to hand it back over to the district to close us out, if that's okay.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Jason.
I think we're doing this. I think for the most part, you look at these things, and I think these are all components, pieces to the puzzle that we already possess. I think the conversation that's being had is more about how do we centralize and focus and really be streamlined about how all of these different organizations work to do this kind of work as, from a platform. When I first took Leadership Lincoln, I was introduced to the half dozen volunteer organizations that exist in our community that paid for concrete and helped us spread bark and put up fences. And I didn't know these folks were there until I had an opportunity to participate in that program. And I remember being shocked at what a large percentage of people were just showing up for the community. I think the challenge is each of them sort of compete for opportunities, and they compete for ways in which they can be beneficial. They sort of niche themselves into, well, Kiwanis does this and Rotary does that. And I think this allows for us to really spread a net that captures a lot more opportunities to serve youth. There are volunteer organizations that call, and I'm sure you get this too, Chief, where I'd love to help. How can I volunteer? We don't know where to send them. I mean, we're not exactly sure how to fit them into some sort of active program we might have. We're not exactly sure how to empower them to be beneficial. And I think a framework like this gets everybody speaking the same language. It requires conversations with a cadence so we can have some sort of traction and be able to look back on it. And so Mayor Adriana, when we were talking, you said, oh, I'd love to have a youth commission. And Sean was like, oh, we've tried that. And so I had that conversation with a single student who's in one of our high schools. She interrupted me, said, I could be 20 students today. 20 students. And I said, well, hold on. What would you guys talk about? I mean, what would that look like to you? She goes, I have friends that sit around at lunch. We talk about all the things you guys are doing wrong. I mean, they're high school kids. Remember when we all knew everything? I mean, those are great times, right? The point is, I don't think we're asking enough of our youth. And I keep saying this like a broken record, but growing up shouldn't be a light switch. It should be a dimmer. It should be something that slowly over time, you add weight to the load so that when a kid graduates from high school, they're prepared for the next step. One of the scariest things I did with my kids was the first resume, as they sat in front of me and said, they're all AP students. They passed AP exams. They got accepted to colleges. And they said, well, I don't have any skills. What do you mean you don't have any skills? You're smarter than I am right now. Like, how could you say you don't have skills? And I think it's because we don't ask them to solve real problems. We incubate them and then we kick them out of the nest. And I think opportunities like this, it's not just how do we serve the kids, it's how do we build a platform that allows the kids to serve the community. And that's a big part of, I think, what we're missing. But what I like about this is it gets us all using the same words, gets us all sort of communicating from the same sheet of music per se. And I think we can be a lot more organized about how we deliver and boy, would I love to see some actual youth data drive the way the city grows in the future. I mean, I think kids that feel like that they own a community, the responsibility of a community, just treat it better. So as one member of your board, or say the Western Placer School Board, this has my complete support. And it also fits with the agenda that the rest of my colleagues have set forth for the district as well. I would imagine this to have glowing support, and I hope it does with your group as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
Do you have any questions?
Thank you for that. That was a great presentation. Council, questions, comments?
My only comment is I'm really jealous you're doing it now when I'm off. I was able to talk to Carrie about it, months ago, I want to say. Really exciting, I think. Kudos for doing it.
Yeah.
Please
you're-
do.
Yeah. You're not moving. Any other comments or questions?
So I never had kids. I'm a little bit backing off and deferring to those folks who do currently, but it looks like a great plan moving forward. It'd be fascinating knowing this community to see how it all comes together. And I'm right there with you to the degree I can be, with input from everybody else who actually knows what the kids need.
May I respond real quick? Can I just encourage my fellow council members to do whatever we can on that? Because the first thought that came into my mind, and forgive me for doing buzzwords here, was the skate park. Like, we make decisions that like severely impact, and I supported not, it wasn't safe, right? But now where do we put it and how do we build it? And what does that look like? And how do we collaborate with the school district? And maybe if we're talking together, it actually ends up being used by way more kids and catches kids who might be going and getting in trouble after because their parents aren't home. Like, we're not seeing what they see. They can't make the decisions that we make. So when Carrie told me about this, I like literally like got a cheesy smile. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So I would just encourage, to the extent that we can collaborate on really consequential decisions that fold into it, I think it would be really great.
I'm in.
I just wanted to add to my comment to put it in a broader context. I was on the board of directors of the Police Activities League for 10 years and reaching out through PD to very highly at-risk kids within our community and bringing them back into the fold and letting them know that they all walk out of it together and find a way forward for that kid. So if we can, that's a great pathway for me. It's a familiar one for me. And maybe it is for some others as well.
I'm a little bit closer than Paul to kids. My wife raised our two kids. And so I got some osmosis
And you know your wife.
there. It's a great program. Really, obviously has legs. It's been around. What do you want from us? You gave a good presentation. I don't know what the ask is.
Well, they want our support and to incorporate into our programs, but they also want money. So we're to be a partner with them I mean, Carrie has said, the superintendent has said, we're going to do it regardless. We'll foot the whole bill if we have to. But if the city wants to come alongside and be partners, that's what they would like. And so I think that's the request. Am I wrong?
No.
Okay.
And ultimately, and in conversation with Adrian about the work that's been is great. The reality is when somebody has some skin in the game, they tend to be more committed. And so us footing the bill and then trying to get stakeholders to truly be engaged and committed throughout the process might be more difficult. So the hope is that if we do it as a partnership, then it truly does become a youth master plan for the city and the district is a part of it. But otherwise it'll ultimately be a youth master plan for our school district. And we'll do the best that we can to engage stakeholders that also serve, but we just feel like it's much broader if we're all involved. And with the PAL piece, I think that's huge. Our partnership with the police department and our school resource officers, invaluable. It's amazing. And we're so grateful for that. And I feel like the more we can do that and be speaking collaboratively about how we're serving our youth, it's huge.
And I am really excited to put together a youth commission and have them be part of this, civic engagement. That is so exciting and so needed. And I'm really thrilled with that. So I forget though, Sean, what was the amount that we were talking about?
It's roughly 50,000, right?
Yeah,
For
for
our
each, yeah. So
share.
it's-
Okay.
But just to double down on that, it's not just money, Dan. You want money and collaboration.
Collaboration.
Like we already, and I appreciate it. I'm just saying, like,
Yep.
in the last 4 years, the relationship between the city and the school district has improved so exponentially. And so we have a good relationship, but I feel like this just kicks it to a focused new level where we're like making informed decisions on both ends, I think is what she's wanting. And that way we have skin in the game and also are actually in the game, not other people who are, we sometimes give money and then we're done.
Mhm.
Did I read that right?
Yes, yes.
All right. Anybody else? Bill, did you have any comments, questions? Okay. Thank you so much.
you.
Yes. So are we looking for direction as in we're all in, or are we looking for, like, we're going to talk about it later? What are we doing here, Sean?
It sounds like there's interest, so it'd be
Yes.
pretty simple just for us to agendize a couple of different funding options for our share at the
That would
next
be
meeting.
perfect.
So-
Great. Awesome.
And Carrie will bill us, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm thinking maybe an MOU of sorts too, that just talks about like our roles and responsibilities as we kind of pursue this. So
That sounds good. Great.
perfect.
Thank you both. Thank you all three of you very much. Appreciate it. Very excited. Awesome. Okay, and now we're going to move to what was item 10C, the workshop for Lincoln Wastewater Treatment Plant Joint Powers Authority. We're going to receive an update on the ongoing discussions relating to the Lincoln Wastewater Treatment Plant and associated proposal for the formation of a joint powers agreement and facilitation of an expansion at the wastewater treatment plant. And I think, Sean, you're going to start us out. And I do want to say to our guests from the county here, I heard your presentation went really well this morning, and I apologize. I was under the impression that just staff was going to be presenting at both things. Otherwise, I would have been there with Councilmember Carlos Skint. And so totally missed that boat. I apologize, but it's great to have you all tonight and looking forward to working through this.
Sure. So given that we have a big agenda and there's public comment, I'm going to move through this presentation fairly quickly. If, as a member of the public or on the city council, you feel like you're not getting everything, not to worry, we will do another following meeting as was been the direction. But for this evening, they're pulling up the PowerPoint currently, but I don't need it for the beginning. So City of Lincoln owns and operates a tertiary treatment plant that serves not only all of Lincoln, but portions of the county as well, specifically area that's located north of Auburn. And the city has been serving the county through this facility for roughly the last 10 years. The agreement that's known as COJA was agreed to in 2012, and the city worked with the county on the installation and then operation of the facilities that transmit the wastewater down to our plant, really for about the last 10 years, well, 8 to 9 years after construction. So as we're still waiting for the PowerPoint to come on, I'll move on to the next section of the report, which is, I think that's fair to say, and it was said today at the board meeting, that there have been challenges with that agreement in recent years. And along the way, the county and city determined that the best way to work through those challenges was to establish a 2x2 committee that met and attempted to work through a number of administrative matters. Some of them had to do with treatment. Some of them had to do with how billing was being allocated to both agencies. All of this done against the backdrop of the real elephant in the room, which is that our plant is nearing capacity and is going to need to be expanded in short order. And the project is not a cheap project. It's a $58 to $59 million project at last estimate. And we estimate that for about every month that we do not move forward with the expansion, it probably increases in cost by roughly $500,000, give or take. Okay, we're up. So I don't know, Peter, if you can hear me, but you can jump through that slide. I've gone through it. Okay, stop for a sec. This is just a graphical representation. That orange line at the top sort of indicates where what we call SMD1 is located, and you see the squiggly lines run all the way down into the red area, which then moves all the way through Lincoln and ends up at that blue blob in the lower left-hand corner, which is our wastewater treatment plant. Okay, we can go to the next slide. I think I covered most of this. You could go to the next slide, Peter. Thank you. Okay, so in order to resolve some of these core issues with the COJA agreement, a new model driven primarily by the need to expand the plant has been discussed. And we've really worked over the last 2 years to come up with the model for how it could operate. It would be a joint powers authority. There are a number of them in this county and all throughout the state. It's an independent agency, and the sole purpose is the operation, finance, and management of the wastewater treatment facility. The board would be comprised, as we've discussed, of 2 members of each governing body from the city and the county. So 2 council members and 2 board of supervisors. And the anticipated growth in the service area of the plant is an important reasoning for the formation of JPA, and I'll circle back to that here in just a few minutes. The JPA would be responsible for setting future rate increases. The city and county individually would be responsible for the Proposition 218 process that we have to go through to prove up the need for new rates. And the JPA would be responsible for any future or potential liabilities and regulatory compliance. Okay, next slide. So one of the things that we thought through and talked a lot about is how do we set this new agency up for success? How do we avoid some of the errors or at least conflict that has occurred in the past? And so we have sort of talked about some core values. One being all for one for all. We treat a basic equivalent dwelling unit, that's what EDU stands for, the same in the city as we do in the county. All of them are the same regardless of the boundary. We align interests, so what is good for one is good for the other, and what is bad for one is bad for the other. There's no individual decision making, it's communal decision making. And we have shared obligations and responsibilities. So we not only have to maintain and provide an excellent level of service for current folks in the system, but also for future. Okay, next slide. So in order to develop the JPA, we had to create a process of formation. So we have Business Points Technical Advisory Group. And we engaged an outside attorney who specializes in this type of JPA formation. We need to bring it forward in short order after these workshops to the City Council and Board of Supervisors for their concurrence and formation. We would need to select an interim general manager and a finance director, some of that work in anticipation to have it teed up should this be approved. It's already happened. In fact, Nita was sitting just a few days ago. Establish the JPA and transfer the assets to the JPA. So all capital assets are now transferred over to the Joint Powers Authority, and then establish charges and construct the expansion. Okay, next slide. Here's some of the draft business points. The JPA would own and operate the facilities, as I've said. They employ agents and employees. That may be through a contract, they may be through direct employment, and the board will have to decide that. They will establish charges and other costs in connection with the regional facility. They will charge us our proportionate share of the cost of running the facility. They will develop and adopt policies and procedures, be governed by the JPA board, as we talked about, and have the authority to change the agreement upon a unanimous vote of the JPA board. And this is an important component because one of the things we want to avoid, it's important to think about the board not in terms of personalities, because while two of this body and two of the Board of Supervisors will sit on it, people change, times change. People don't run for re-election. New people come on board as new leaders. And so it has a possibility of having all different kinds of personalities. And what you want to do is create a scenario where you sort of force, through the way it's been constructed, anybody, regardless of who they are, to have to work with their other three colleagues in order to get anything important done. Okay, next slide. Okay, real quick on the expansion. As I said, estimated costs $58 to $59 million to be completed in 2 phases. Bond debt of between $34 and $42 million to be used for phase 1. This depends on how we decide to expand, and there's a lot of nuance to that. I'm not going to go into nitty-gritty detail on that because that'll be a separate discussion. But essentially what we're trying to do is find the most cost-effective way to have a phase 1 of the expansion that allows new development to pay fees for that new expansion, which will then fund phase 2, hopefully entirely. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, this is a little blurry and I apologize about that, but this is essentially a chart that shows a variety of different possibilities of how we could phase the project. The one that we're most interested in at the current moment, and we'll have a formal recommendation on that when this moves forward, is the the line that says phase 2 first with peak flow shaving, and the operational cost, or the construction cost is roughly $34.4 million. It purchases roughly 2,100, more than 2,100 equivalent dwelling units in capacity, which will allow us to collect a significant sum to fund phase 2, which would bring in the vast majority of the remainder of the capacity. And we can go to the next slide. Okay, I'm going to pass this over just briefly for the next 2 slides to Nita, who's going to explain a little bit. She was really the driving force in building the financial pro forma for this organization. And so she's going to talk a little to that, and then we'll talk about rates in a moment.
Thank you. So as Sean said, this is the financial pro forma for the wastewater treatment and treatment only. I just want to make sure we're clear on that distinction. We began building a budget, an estimated budget and projection for this new entity from the ground up. So we couldn't simply take the city's budget and divide it into sections of treatment and collections. We really need to look at what does a standalone agency need in order to operate, and what are those expenses. So we use that basis in order to develop this. The largest expense for this agency is under other operating contract to operate the wastewater treatment plant of almost $6 million. So that's the majority of your O&M as the operator. And once the JPA is formed, the JPA board and general manager can make the determination to continue with that contract, to potentially go out for a different contractor, or to even hire employees and bring the entire thing in-house. The next largest expenditure is, of course, that expansion, the phase 1 expansion of about $43 million. And as Sean said, it kind of depends on what's going to be in the first phase of the expansion. Whether it's going to be a new oxidation ditch or a new clarifier will determine how much that the cost of the expansion. We did develop a debt amount for that expansion based on an estimate of interest rate of 5.5%. It is possible that the interest rate for the bonds for that finance or for that expansion could be lower. We don't know until we go out for bonding, and it's better from a financial pro forma perspective to come up with a more conservative or a higher dollar estimate to show that the entity can actually support those expenses. So we used all of that information to develop the rate for the wastewater treatment, which I think is on the next slide, if you would. Oh, sorry about that. Well, it's later on anyways. So this is kind of just your basic of the financial stats. Talking again about the operating expenses of that 7.8 million, the O&M or contracts, et cetera, is about 68% of the operating expenses. Utilities, the next highest expense is 21% of operating expenses, with 9% being your admin, professional services, and overhead. The current pro forma includes a general manager that it would be a contracted employee, but a finance director that would be a professional services. And then it lists out the capital expenditures that would be in the first year, that 42 million for phase 1, plus some additional capital expenditures that we believe the agency would need in order to spool up for IT equipment, and then some scheduled SCADA upgrades, and 180,000 for fleet equipment. Next slide. So this is where we get into the heart of that debt payment and the rate that is generated from the O&M expenses and the debt. As you can see on there on the lower left side, the rate for the treatment facility by itself would be $34.56 per EDU. And that's comprised mostly of those O&M expenses, but you can see that $12 is attributable to the debt, which is going to be used for the phase 1 expansion. The pro forma has been developed so that, as Sean said, as new people join in and pay their connection fees, that those connection fees should be sufficient to fund the next phase, so that new development is funding the next iteration of the expansion. We also wanted to provide for the council's information, a breakdown of an estimate of the city's collection fee. So as you can see there, the O&M expenses for collections would be 16.79 with capital and R&R expenses of $13. The existing debt for collections of just 73 cents to come up with a total collection charge of $30.63. So a proposed rate for Lincoln ratepayers would be $65.19 at the moment. And again, those are up for discussion. Once the bonds occur, the JPA will know what its final rate is, and that will help the city determine what its final rate would be for a 218 process. I did want to stress that that rate of about $65 per EDU would be the rate regardless of whether the JPA was formed or not. We are trying to build a rate that is sustainable. Right now, we have a rate that allows for a deficit in the wastewater treatment plant. We're expending more funds than we're taking in revenues and dwindling down our fund balance, which is why we now have to go out for bonds in order to do an expansion. So it's just that snowball effect. Without that sufficient rate, we would be in the same situation years from now. We want to avoid that.
So, thank you, Nita. You can go to the next slide, Peter. Thanks. So I'm going to get to this in just one second, but I want to just echo one separate of formation of a JPA, that we remember that one of the reasons that there's significant rate differences and changes that are likely ahead for many Lincoln ratepayers is that we haven't adjusted rates in sewer in 8 to 10 years. And it's just not sustainable. There's no business that I'm aware of that can continue operating at current cost. This is simply some projections that we've put together that estimate what types of revenues we think we can collect based on some estimates we've made on growth patterns. It could be more than these dollar figures, depending on the rate of growth, or it could be less if we slip into some type of recession where the building industry stops producing homes. But you can see the very bottom cell range that we have the opportunity to generate enough revenue to fully fund phase 2 of the expansion, which is great because it means that it's not something that is a debt that you have to pay and ultimately borne by the ratepayers. You can move to the next slide. Okay, so we're nearing the end. And I wanted to just point out one of the things I believe is one of my responsibilities on any major policy consideration for the community and for the city council is to give you my honest assessment of advantages and disadvantages to everything so that you can have a robust conversation about it. From staff's perspective, here are the advantages of the Joint Powers Authority. We would be charging and setting adequate rates and fees to be sustainable into the future. So hopefully we avoid situations where it's been a 10-year period and rates have not been adjusted. And so there needs to be a major course correction. They're going to incorporate all of those bullet points below that identify and spend significant time master planning how they're going to grow the service to meet demand. This is something that the city does internally already, but one way to think about this is this will be a subject matter expertise organization. They will do one thing, and whereas the city has dozens of services, sometimes it's very difficult for us to spend so much of our time just on one. We will align the county and city to establish a sustainable authority and stabilize rates. We talked about that. We'll create a specialized JPA that sole focus is the efficient delivery of services of treatment. This was really important part of the discussion that we write into the agreement that the goal is to create a thin, efficient operation that provides the best possible service for the cheapest possible cost to the ratepayer. We believe that there's a potential for more transparency. This will be a clearinghouse where you can go get any and all information you want on wastewater, if you happen to want any of that. I haven't met anybody other than engineers that actually want that, though. It'll create a mechanism theoretically to resolve conflicts with the county as partners versus what we kind of had now as more of a customer vendor relationship. This really marries the two organizations together in providing this service. And perhaps most importantly, there's the concept of liability and transfer of risk to a third party. So this organization will stand alone. They will have to have their own insurance and will be responsible for mistakes that or calamities that could occur out at the plant. Okay, next slide. Here are some potential drawbacks. And as I go through these, I will note that many of these are perceived drawbacks, although it doesn't mean that they're not worth thinking about, because sometimes perception is reality. There are concerns about potential to separate goals within the new JPA format, depending on jurisdiction. Perception that Lincoln is giving away an asset. I think that what I'd say about that is that I felt that way as we had worked through this process a number of times. And then it occurred to me the other day in having a conversation with Councilmember Carlskip that we really aren't giving away anything, because we are still the owners and operators of the plant. We just are doing it through a combined partnership with the county. And for what it's worth, if this organization were ever to dissolve or just wasn't going to work out, the documents are structured in such a way that all of those assets return to the city of Lincoln. Placer County will have less and less a percentage share of the plant as Lincoln grows over time. And so concerns may be raised over equal voting power by county. So, you know, I think it's probably a fair bet that we will naturally have more capacity over time, just given our growth projections. However, the voting power component is something that actually is very similar in other joint power formats. So are very similar, sort of a one agency, one vote, regardless of how large you are kind of format. But it comes back to this concept of providing an equal seat at the table and forcing both jurisdictions to work together to resolve complications or differences. And you can't really do that when someone's has a minority position. Navigation of complexity and establishing true equity given a vast difference in land use and building structure. So this is one of the things that it has been complicated, is that the way that the county provides services is in some cases very different to how the city does it. And so it's trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. But what we found through this process of trying to design this authority is that it actually has given us the ability to work with county staff and really think through theoretically about how we can go back to those central tenets. What's good for you is good for us. What's bad for you is going to be bad for us as well. This second to last bullet is just part of the game. Some overhead costs will now need to be absorbed directly by the collection system that are being currently covered under treatment. So small portions of some staff are covered through treatment costs because we spend some time on that. We're going to have to reallocate those. It's not significant from a budgetary perspective, and it's not significant in the course of a multi-million dollar budget. And this last one is just one that I'm aware could be a criticism, although I think there's an answer to it. The perception that additional government is being created that may cost slightly more than current operational expenditures. I believe that over time, if it's set up correctly and we're governing this through the tenets that have been established, it may end up being actually a more efficient operation. And the concept of additional government, from my perspective at least, I'm not a fan of seeing additional governments pop up here and there, but I am a fan of seeing the governments that we do have partner with one another to create something that's more efficient for the people they serve. And so that's sort of the concept by which this has been created. So those are the potential drawbacks that could be worth discussing. And I think, Peter, last slide, I think that might be it. Oh, now you can go to the next one. Peter. Yep, thank you. That was a leftover from a previous presentation.
Great, thank you for that very much. Okay, council, would you like to have a conversation first, or would you like to hear public comment first? Would you like to begin?
As would I. That was
Okay.
our primary reason
That's
for putting this on
right.
the agenda
Yep,
tonight.
that's why I asked. Okay, so we're going to open the floor for public comment on this. Ms. Gamp. Oh,
Mayor, I'm so sorry.
that's
I
okay.
wanted to recognize Supervisor Jim Holmes is here this evening, who's on the 2x2, Public Works Director Ken Grimm, and Kevin Bell, the Assistant Public Works Director. I think that's just the three of them tonight.
Thank you guys for being here, gentlemen. Okay, Ms. Scanlon, is there anybody on Zoom that has a comment?
Yes, Mayor, Lena Lebowski, please go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm really, I was leery to hear the start of this, and it looks like you've put together a lot of plans that might work out for the city. One of my concerns was the giving away of the asset, but that was explained fairly well. My other concern is generally the city doesn't come out very well anytime they deal with the county. Lincoln tends to get the short end of the stick, but I'm happy and pleased with Sean's. I know, or I feel like he's a great businessman, and all of you on the council are sharp people as well. So I'm hoping that this can work out to Lincoln's benefit. I just ask you to carefully consider every phase of this agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Lena. Appreciate that.
Byron, please go ahead. Byron, I'm not seeing that you have audio, so. Sorry, no.
No, okay, if he comes back, then we'll come back. Okay, anybody in the council chambers wish to comment on this item? Fran, go right ahead.
Fran Nevis, resident, and I didn't fill out anything because I didn't expect to say anything, but Sean, because you're new to Lincoln, and I think everybody needs to know that the wastewater treatment plant is a fantastic bird migration area. So from November to February, we have all kinds of people interested in the wastewater treatment plant. And it's open 8 to 5, Monday to Friday, and you can drive around the ponds, you know, and it's just a wonderful asset to have this bird migration in Lincoln. Thank you. I hope you go see it.
Thank you, Fran.
So now you found that other person that's interested in the sewer plant data.
There you go. Yes, go ahead. Are you, hard to see you back there.
Hopefully you can see me better now. Sean, thank you for that presentation. I'm actually married to an engineer, so I hear a lot about these kind of things, and he works with wastewater also. So Fran, that was the best comment about wastewater I've heard lately. Let's keep it in a good direction. I am curious if any of the changes that are happening in this proposal and the deal with the county will be a part of the 193, if that thoroughfare will be affected at all by this plan. What that looks like if Village 1 or Deer Crossing or the 12 Bridges development is affected by any upgrades, construction, road changes. I'm curious about that and if that's part of council discussions and part of the considerations for this process.
Yeah, good question. So I guess it's a yes and a no. No, it is not going to affect the physical environment of 193 because a lot of the transmission infrastructure is already in place and is adequate for the time being. Yes, it does affect all projects in Lincoln and Lincoln's ability to develop economically, because without capacity to serve not only for growth, but for current residents, we essentially hamstring ourselves and are unable to expand. And I did want to point one more thing out I didn't mention during the the presentation, which is that there may be a perception that the expansion is only required as a result of growth, and I think that's actually a misnomer. Plants are like any other infrastructure. They get old, they break down, and they need to be rebuilt. And so sooner or later, regardless of whether or not Lincoln ever built another home, we would need to do some type of major investment in that facility.
Thank you. I see that Mr. Chapman is with us. Go ahead, Mr. Chapman.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, thank you. Madam Mayor, council members, city staff, and all of those taking time on this subject. On a negative, for example, just to get everything in perspective, of all the services and things that we have in our everyday lives, from getting clean water, electricity, gas, phones, food, school, jobs, etc. The one thing that most people don't like to talk about, because sometimes I think it's just perceived as not an easy subject to approach. But if, for a moment, if some sort of catastrophe happened locally on a larger scale, whatever it may be, I can guarantee you, of all the things that I just mentioned, actually one of the most important is how to deal with human waste. If you think about that for a moment, literally that's an issue that takes place as soon as everything stops working. So however we get to wherever we need to get to, and yes, money is always an issue, but pay particular attention by getting there. I think this is something that definitely needs to be put into place sooner than later, because it is something that once it does happen, it's really difficult to play catch up on a major scale. So with that, thank you for my time.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. All right, is there anybody else in the, yes?
My name is Ann Constantine Burge, and thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. I think this is a wonderful idea, and one thing that y'all could think about is people are going to be angry in Placer County and Lincoln when you hear $48 million. But if you take that same platform that the Western Placer County School District had, talking to the people, asking, what do you all need? And if you go to the community and say, this is what we're doing, maybe go to the service clubs, go to Sun City, Lincoln Hills. This is what we've got. This is what we want to do. It may be more receptive by the residents. And that way you might not have too many letters to the editor. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken, did you want to make a comment, please? Welcome to our council chambers. It's good to have you.
Thank you for having me this evening. My name is Ken Grimm. I'm the Public Works Director for the county. I want to just take the opportunity to thank your council for the leadership and the participation in the oversight committee that really brought us here today. There's more work still left to be done, but we're on the road. And I think it's really helping us re-envision what wastewater looks in this region. Granted, not everyone might care about that, but for us, it's actually a pretty important service that we provide. And really, city manager and his team insisting on a mutually beneficial win-win relationship. What's good for one, I've heard that said, and that is so true. We've in the past sometimes been more competitive. Maybe I have you pay 50 cents so I can save 50 cents, and that's just not sustainable, and it's not going to work. It's got to be, when I save $1, you save $1, cost me a quarter, cost you a quarter. And I think we've got the basis of that. We're still talking. But with that, along with sharing the benefits, we also have to start sharing the responsibility, because there is a lot of responsibility associated with a wastewater treatment plan. And so I think that's what this plan is trying to do, is put together an organization that will focus on that for the benefit of all of our ratepayers. We appreciate your consideration, anything we can do, but appreciate being here tonight and you guys taking this up as a discussion.
Thank you, Ken. And just want to thank all your staff for all their hard work, and Supervisor Holmes and Supervisor Gore for your leadership as well. It's been much appreciated. Okay, one last call for public comment. No? Okay, we'll bring it back to the council. I know we've been through this a lot, so your questions are probably all answered, but do you have any other comments or? Go ahead, you're the driver.
A horrible project. There's no way that that I can really comment on. I've been involved. I'm currently the chair of the 2x2. We've worked hard and come up with a very reasonable plan for expansion with a lot of alternatives that we haven't settled on yet. The governance structure of a JPA and the core values associated with that JPA are really ensure its success. We have other models operating in the city, like Western Plaster Waste Management. They concentrate on waste management, do a supreme job, and have a board of 5 cities in the county and a range of sizes of those board member, not the board members, but the people that the board member represents. And I think the history shows how well that organization works. We're in the midst of a huge expansion there caused by primarily by state permit changes, but they're in the best position to solve that problem because that organization only exists to work with solid waste. We're forming an organization that the people involved with it are only interested in sewer water and handle that in the most efficient, cost-effective, and safe way, keep up with the permitting requirements with very little and ultimately none additional cost. The expansion is going to happen, period. The large number that we're talking about, as a matter of course, has to happen as soon as possible. What we're really talking about is not the expansion or the cost of the expansion or what that's going to do to our rates, which is horrible. What we're talking about is how is the governance going to work? And this is about setting up a JPA where management and the board are only, when they're working, are only concentrating on one thing, and that's to make the best wastewater treatment facility in the region. Best and most efficient, not as a side job, which is the way it is when it's integrated with either the county or the city as just one of the other utilities. So that's.
Thank you.
I'll go. What, if I'm the public, what I want to make sure that everyone's hearing, because with very few exception, most people don't feel the need to spend their Tuesday night listening to us ramble about city business, but we have been talking about this expansion and the needed expansion and being at capacity and how are we going to do it and inadequate rates. Like, these are things we've been talking about my entire term for the last 2.5 years in particular. We have had workshops. We have tried to tell everyone, this is happening. This is what's going to happen if we don't do it. And this is the answer that we've come to. And as Ms. Lebowski noted, sometimes things have been painful with the county. And I can't help but think, had there been a JPA, it wouldn't cost $59 million. It would have cost half that. We both would have had skin in the game, to the superintendent's comment earlier when she said, sometimes when you have something for free, you don't have the same motivation. If we both are having skin in the game, we have financial investments, we have joint decision-making, and it's all on both bodies, it would have been to the best interest of all of our joint residents. And it's been a real shame that it took 2.5 years to get here, but we got here and we have a solution. And so if I'm the public, what I want you to hear is we finally seem to have worked through that 2.5 year choke point. And there's something that seems like a reasonable solution that the county's happy about. We seem happy about. Obviously, that has to be permanent, like made, we have to vote on it still and all of those things. But we've come to a really good spot that we've never been in before. That's great. Know that it has to happen. So even if the JPA doesn't get voted on, the expansion has to happen or we're going to turn into a third world country. And I don't want to be one. I would like for my toilet to flush appropriately. So that's coming. And know that other parts of this, although Councilman Carlson said we're not talking about rate increases, you cannot expand the facility without handling our finances, to Nita's point earlier. We are not collecting adequately. It's going to go up whether we do the JPA, whether we don't, and it's coming and it's gonna suck. And I probably shouldn't use that word in a council meeting, but I don't know a better word for it. Like it's gonna be kind of painful. It's gonna be a big increase. So I just wanna make sure that that's getting out in the public so people aren't just surprised by it. And to your comment, we're gonna do our best to try and get that message out. Because that's not what we're voting on when this even happens. Those rates will have to go through a process and will have to be voted on. And if the JPA happens, it might not even be here. It'll be the JPA, right, on the treatment side that does that, because now there will be a separate governing body and a separate governing entity, but it's still your pocketbook. So it's still coming. So those would be the three things. Oh, and the one that you made sure to point on, Anita, is this is just treatment. Collection, we still do. That's still a bill. That's going to go up. So when you see that $32, that's half of it. Whether we do the Joint Powers Authority, whether we don't, it's going to be roughly $60. So those are the things that I want the public to get out of it. We finally are in a good place. I think we would have been in a great place with a lot less money had this been in place, a while ago. And it's going to hurt your pocketbooks just a little bit. Then it'll get us on the right track, and it won't have to be those big increases again. It'll kind of reset the whole thing.
Councilman Lawrenson, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I have to admit, I'm still not sold on the JPA. I don't see the advantages of the JPA over, us hiring a facilities base operator to run the plant and then charge the county as a customer. Adding this overall JPA, this overall bureaucracy, will cost something. I mean, it's not going to be for free. And then giving away some of our power to the county is not really advantageous, considering that most of the stuff that goes into that plant is ours. Most of the source, it's ours, and more it's going to be ours. Okay. So continue treating the county as a customer, I don't think it's a problem. So, like I say, I'm not really sold 100% on the JPA.
Thank you. Want to add anything?
I can. We've had lengthy conversations about all this. All of you probably are aware of my hesitations about the governance structure of the JPA. There's some things that I think need to be worked out there. I will say that I am, after our lengthy discussions, and I think many of our positions has shifted as we've gone through this. I am cautiously supportive of the JPA, but I'm also on a bit of a listening tour right now. It's why I wanted it on the agenda for tonight, for the public to have input. I want you to have, and those listening and those who haven't even heard about this yet, that we'll hear about it from all of you, have time to process this. And so when we bring it back again, have better informed, better thought out conversations about all this. It affects each and every one of us greatly. And I think it's important that this is a decision that we all make together.
Right. And I'm kind of with you. I am a lot more comfortable than I was when we first started. I appreciate all the hard work that's gone into it. And so there are a few things that still need to be worked out, important things. But I think that I'm ready to say we can continue marching forward. So I think that's what you're looking for, is consensus that we can continue marching forward.
Yes, and it was asked by a few council members that, I do a rerun of this in a couple of weeks, so we're going to put out a little bit more public noticing and information just in case there are other folks that would like to come down or Zoom in and listen to the same presentation. Just so it's difficult for us to really get a robust public outreach going when we really just kind of put this together we were trying to line up our presentations to the board and council at the same time. So we're going to do a little bit more outreach and then allow us to come back and I'll give the same spiel again. And then, but in terms of everything else, we are moving forward with the county on finalizing documents and they'll be agendized for your consideration in the next couple of meetings.
Because we do want full transparency. We want the public to be aware completely.
Mayor, may I? And I was just gonna maybe have Sean for the public's benefit. And your comment made me think that this has been something that we have been working so hard to get done for so long because it has to happen like last year. And now we're at a place where it looks like some, I'm sure on both sides, hesitation, concerns aside, but trying to move forward, solidify something so that we can get it all done. It can't be something that's like, okay, and now let's take another, 6 months to do really robust outreach because we have to build it or we will have really big problems. So one of the requests that we had was with the time that we have, let's give this presentation as many times as possible. Let's do really aggressive outreach, even though it's a short time frame, to try to at least get it in front of people so that there's opportunity to comment. So it's not one of those, oh, I had no idea it's coming. I'm sure there will still be, I had no idea it's coming, but did just want to explain why it has to be fast. To Sean's point, what did you say? Every month is an additional $500,000. That's all taxpayer dollars, but it's not just an additional $500,000. It's like we're going up against actually being at capacity where we have actual infrastructure, really drastic issues.
Right. So you're good with moving forward?
Yeah, to the extent that we can continue to work through things, I think we have to.
Right. And Bill, you're still cautious? Okay. Okay. All right. So I think you have your direction. Just we keep marching forward and keep working on it and making progress. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Really appreciate it. Okay. We are on item number 7, public comment on non-agenda items. So thank you to the public you have waited so patiently. And so I've organized these as topic wise I'll do the best of my ability to keep them in the same topic, just so we have continuity. So we're going to start with Kevin Siddle. Go ahead and step to the mic and tell us why you are here.
My name is Kevin Siddle, Madam Mayor, council members, city staff. Thank you for having me. Several of you know my name. I live on First Street, 1544 First Street. We have an ever increasing speeding problem on First Street. As a matter of fact, when I was coming here tonight, a vehicle, as I was walking across my street to get into my car, a vehicle doing about 40, 45 miles an hour went around me in opposing lane of traffic, didn't even slow down. A couple of weeks ago, another incident, I stepped between 2 vehicles on my side of the street, and a car was coming past me in excess of 50 miles an hour, grinning from ear to ear, staring me in the eye. There used to be what I call an inverted speed hump at O Street. And when they came through and did all the renovations of the sewer lines, the power lines, and what am I missing? Gas lines. They removed that. There's been a stop sign there the whole time. People do not stop at that stop sign. Probably, I would say 25% of the traffic that goes down First Street. Now I'm talking about First Street between Lincoln Boulevard and R Street. I have presented to you a petition, and I have got, I would guesstimate something like 93% of the residents on that stretch of R Street to sign that petition to compel the city of Lincoln to put in some speed mitigation measures on First Street. Now, technically, in my petition, I list one school, but technically we have three. There's a private school, there's the preschool, and First Street Elementary. We also have a church. There's been numerous near misses. Impetus for me bringing this to you was the death of a motorcyclist back on April 9th. In a 25-mile-an-hour speed zone. The skid mark from that motorcycle was at least 15 feet. As I parked my car, I got out and I walked it. Now, if that gentleman, I do not have any idea what happened because I cannot avail myself to that police report because I'm not a party to the accident. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a police officer. But I would be willing to bet, being a motorcyclist myself, if that gentleman had been doing the speed limit, he would not have died. Thank God it happened on a Saturday, because if it happened Monday through Friday, all of the children at First Street would have been a witness to that death on First Street, a 25-mile-an-hour zone. I implore you to have the city put in some speed bumps, speed humps, whatever, something, because it's getting out of hand.
Okay, thank you very much for your
Thank you.
comments. Thank you. All right, next on this topic is Jose Fuentes.
How you guys doing?
Hi.
My name is Jose Fuentes and I also live on First Street. I wanted to also talk about, I'm his neighbor, by the way, and I have 3 kids and it's every day, after school, at night, people just don't respect the stop signs. They fly through the street. Just last week, my mother was a victim of a hit and run on First Street, and I have pictures right here. I have the picture of the fatality that Kevin was talking about, if you guys wish to see it, which I don't know, it's up to you guys. But yeah, we're just trying to get this resolved as soon as possible. I don't want to see any of my kids get hit or anybody else's kids, get hit by a car because nothing being done about it, And yeah, me and Kevin, we sit outside and we try to get people to slow down, especially around those school hours, but people just don't care, And so, yeah, we're just here to try to get some help and it would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Fuentes.
Thank you.
Okay, and then Alex Franklin.
So I'm Alex Franklin. Oh, sorry. And I live at 1573 First Street on the other side, more towards our street. I have 4 children under the age of 9. I've lived there for 11 years. When I first moved in, there was quite a bit of traffic during school time, morning, and when people came home. The bypass opened, a lot of the traffic went away. A few years ago, they got rid of the humps at O and First. Since then, the speed on the street has been dramatically increasing. From my house, which is about 4 houses from the stop sign, I can see people hit their gas and accelerate past my house going towards where they live. My kids can't play out front. I've called the non-emergency police number and been told multiple times, oh, we might put the sign out there, but you got to call this other number. That's more of a city council thing. We might do some enforcement there. In the period of 6 weeks, there were 3 car accidents. One was a hit and run, which I might be on the police report for that. Guy was flying, going probably 60 miles an hour, slammed on the brakes, car lost control, banged into a parked car, backed up, took off. Luckily, I was there, ran down, got a video of his license plate leaving. Don't know what happened with that. And then one of my neighbors was backing out of their driveway, car speeding, hit him. Another neighbor was turning left into their driveway. Someone went to the right around them and hit her when she was making a left into her driveway. We feel like we don't get any help on First Street. Like we're the forgotten children. I know multiple of us have made phone calls. I've been told previously this was an issue And the city council told people that have lived there a lot longer than me that they couldn't put speed bumps because the fire trucks had to drive down that street. You know, it's one of the things where my kids should be able to play football on the street, you know, or like we did as kids. I know most of us did, but
I don't know about First Street even
First
back
Street.
then. But
yeah,
yes.
I mean, it is a busier street, but I mean, I implore any of you to come sit with me or Jose and watch these cars. In the matter of 20 minutes, you will see somebody going over 50 miles an hour. Like, it is ridiculous. So we'd like your help with
Thank you.
something.
Appreciate that.
Thanks.
Chief, can you make a comment on what's going on with First Street?
Yes, and I want to thank the speakers to come out tonight and speak in a civil tone. I appreciate that because typically these type of complaints can get rather heated. So thank you all for having this conversation and us continuing this as a conversation. We have received complaints on that. And we have used our traffic unit to do directed enforcement out there to observe and monitor and write citations when possible. Problem with that roadway, just tactically speaking, is there's nowhere for us to we can be seen from a long ways away, so everyone's on their best behavior when we're in the area. That is a very wide roadway. If you were to go out there and look at it, it looks like a drag strip just heading east and west. So I will not argue anything that they're saying. I do agree that there's a speed issue. I remember when the Costa Canyons were right there on O Street, it slowed everybody down because everybody bottomed out, and half the time cars would come 45 degrees out of there just so they didn't bottom out. So once those were leveled out, that's certainly less of an obstacle for folks to get through the intersection. As far as long-term issues, I mean, enforcement can only go so far. Whether the city wants to address our no speed bump philosophy or not, that's a conversation to be had.
Well, is it true that we can't put speed bumps because the fire trucks drive on that road?
It's not that we can't, it's just wear and tear on vehicles. It does slow responses, and it would, if we were to have a serious conversation about doing this, we would just need to put all that out on the table and just see what we would expect and just assess any risk that we want to take and any additional costs that we may incur.
Okay.
Again, I'm not, at the end of the day, I'm not opposed to speed bumps. It's just we've received those requests a lot over the years, and as a city, we need to decide, because once we put one in, it's going to be everywhere. And again, if that's how we want to live, I can live with that.
Right. Well, Sean, can you, as staff, can you guys kind of get together and just think about what might be some mitigation measures that we can put in there? And because it is true, it's a dangerous street.
Travis and I can connect with the residents. There's many other treatments that are not speed humps or bumps that are more effective in many ways to address it. And a lot of them relate to choking down the width of the travel lane, because people naturally will mitigate their own speed when you have less room for error,
Okay.
more or less.
All right. Yes.
What about more stop signs?
The location that they're speaking is only about 4 or 5 houses down, so probably 50 to 75 yards from the intersection. So right there, that wouldn't work. And mid roadway, I mean, possibly, but there's still plenty of room for them to get to 50 miles an hour if we went mid block between R and O.
Big sign that says you're being watched.
What about those signs that say your speed limit? Your speed.
Yep. Okay.
A lot of people take that as a challenge, see if they can get a high score.
Well, we'd really appreciate if you guys would huddle up on that and see what we can do for that. Okay, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. All right, next speaker is Ann Constantine Burge.
Thank you all and staff for allowing me to speak on the Titan missile site at Oak Tree Lane off of Highway 193. Water, dirt, shelter, clothing, medicine, and food. We can't live without them. Trichloroethylene, toluene, vinyl chloride, benzenes, dichloroethane. They can kill us. In the late 1950s, the U.S. Air Force constructed 54 Titan I ballistic missile sites across America, with one each in Chico, Live Oak, and Lincoln. On Oak Tree Lane off Highway 193, Beale Air Force Base constructed an underground city, which included a power plant, control center, storage facilities, crew quarters, and 2,500 feet of tunnels and 3 165-foot deep silos, each to house a 90-foot-long ballistic missile equipped with a nuclear warhead. To maintain microscopic level cleanliness of the tubing, pipes, storage tanks, equipment, silo staff used degreasers. One was trichloroethylene, a very harmful chemical referred to as TCE. After used with abandon, the degreasers were taken topside and disposed of on the soil outside the silos. Around the mid-1960s, Lincoln site shut down. TCE and 10 other chemicals reached the groundwater and filled the underground city with TCE contaminated water. According to the Army Corps of Engineers, the 11 chemicals are also found in most of the 25 soil and water monitoring wells around the site. Since the 1980s, local, county, and federal agencies argued over who'd clean up the soil and groundwater contamination. To date, the 25 wells only monitor the contaminated soil and groundwater plumes on their march to and under Sun City, Lincoln Hills. The TCE volatilizes from the groundwater, rises up through the soil and into homes, churches, businesses, and kids' playhouses. Today, the city of Lincoln proposes a residential housing development and very large park over the soil and groundwater contaminated by these harmful chemicals and lead from the gun ranges that used the site. 3 things should be done with the site. The city of Lincoln should buy the land from the developer, immediately clean it up, place covenants on the 275 acres so not even a restroom is ever built on the site. How many of you would suggest your grandbabies live in houses built atop the Titan ballistic missile site even after it's cleaned up? All of you have a copy of this for you all to look at later. If you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Okay, next speaker is Ray Burge.
Madam Mayor, council members, staff, all I want to talk about is water. Recently, I've been having some conversation, sorry, my name is Ray Burge. I live in Sun City, Lincoln Hills. I've been having a conversation that started coincidentally with people about one topic, and that was water. It was generated by all of the housing developments and all the things that are going on around our city. And I'm amazed at how many people feel very strongly about this. So I come here tonight to ask you a question because a question I get asked all the time. You know, they say it takes about 60 gallons of water per person per day. I don't think I drink that much water, but we use their numbers, all right? That's a lot of water. And the last 3 years, Lincoln has grown about 3,000 people. And if you multiply all that out, I won't go through all the numbers, but that's a whole lot of water. My question is this, or my thought is this. We've only got so much water, and I keep hearing from everybody that Lincoln is really healthy. We got our wells, we're in great shape, et cetera. My concern is there's only so much water in the ground. And unless it comes down from up there, ground doesn't make its own water. And the whole world right now is in crisis in terms of water. Southern California, they're panicking. Cities are having moratoriums, which is a nasty word, of course. And what I see is that all of a sudden here, it's exploded. Everywhere I look, there's new survey stakes being put out. There's new houses getting ready. Development's going to be on. And I don't know where the water's going to come from. We may have adequate water today. I don't know. But if climate change is real, and I don't think you can argue that it's not, if the truth of the matter is we're in a drought and probably going to be for a lot more of them coming up, if the truth of the matter is we don't have the same amount of water coming down as we used to, at some point, there's not going to be any water down there. You know, time of being able to take your well, we'll just drill another couple 100 feet and we'll have more water again. Those days may be gone. The aquifers are not refilling. Whole lakes are starting to dry up. There's areas in Southern California where aquifers have been depleted and the ground is literally sinking. The question I'm asked is, what are we going to do about it? They want to know, what is the city doing? I mean, are we just going to just keep building and praying and hoping that someday it's going to rain? Or are there some kind of plans in place to put some kind of a slowdown on this exponential explosion of housing that's going on? I'm not proposing that we have a moratorium on no building. A city that doesn't expand dies. Okay, I realize that. But a city that doesn't take into account these things and has utter chaos, it could be even worse. You can only service so many people so well, and we're already at the point, I mean, Lincoln's already been mandated by the governor to go to stage 2 of our conservation plan, which supposedly we're supposed to be cutting back by 20%. We know that we're in for another
Go
rough
ahead.
year based on all the predictions.
Wrap up real quick, sir. Wrap up. Your time's up. Go ahead and wrap up. Last couple
Sorry.
seconds. No, that's okay. Go ahead.
All
Wrap
I want
up.
to know
Finish.
is, what are you going to do about slowing this expansion down and how we're going to get more water?
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. Okay, our next two speakers are here to talk about the proposed disc golf course. So Jay Grunwald. Yeah, and am I understand that you have a PowerPoint? Okay, so.
I can do it in a minute and a half.
Okay, that's fine. Just want to remind you that you have a 3-minute time.
Correct.
Yeah, go right ahead. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, Council, Chief, whatever it is. Thank you for your time. How do I access? Not there. Okay, then I'll tell you to advance. Okay, good evening. My name is Jay Grunwald. I live on Green Ravine Drive at 1419. My wife and I face we do not back up to the ravine, but face it. Now where is this? Pardon? This? Sorry, over there. Okay, next slide. Okay, a lot of people drive down Green Ravine Drive. There's a dog park there, and you look, there's nothing there. Let's do something with that. It looks like a good potential area. It's a park. There should be other uses there. So that comes in the golf course. The disc golf. My son plays disc golf. I get it. It's an important activity for young people to be outside. But next slide, please. It's not really that. Green Ravine Drive facing the Auburn Ravine floods every year, and we are in a drought. And yet, next slide. They keep driving. I mean, flooding year after year. Next slide. Year after year, and on. Next slide. It's just water going to waste. Kind of at this point, where's it all going? Down to the, But at any rate, you're not going to play disc golf in this. Next slide. So it's a beautiful area. I can't argue that. Next slide. With all that water comes a lot of weeds. This fence that you see there is 4 feet tall. The weeds go over the top of that fence before they bring the sheep in. So it's a fire hazard, which is why the sheep are there. Next slide. Again, it's a beautiful area. They do a really good job. Next slide. Somewhere on this sign, it says there are no other disturbances of protected wetland and habitats. I'm not sure why this is being overlooked or changed or what the reason is. Next slide. But there are also vernal pools in that area. I'm a horticulture major from Cal Poly. I don't have the details on vernal pools, but it's a state and federal regulation that they're preserved. Next slide. Next slide. This is a beautiful area. There's a lot of wildflowers in here also. It's a beautiful place. That's why it's a park. But if you have people walking in there, I get upset when I see kids with dirt bikes and people walking their dogs without a leash. Next slide. The heron rookery. If you've ever been over near McDonald's, there's a gigantic heron rookery. This is where they come to eat and bring the frogs back to their little ones. Next slide. There's the salmon. Oh God. Next slide, real quick. This is a counting station that I'm not sure who's put that up. Go ahead, next slide. This is one of the vernal pools. Next slide. Vernal pool, next slide. I think I'm almost done, and I am done.
Okay.
So there's a lot more there than just dirt and be honest, it's beautiful the way it is.
Right, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, Jean Morgan. Thank you for doing that, Gwen.
Thank you. My name is Gene Morgan. I've lived in Lincoln for 10 years. I'm a retired educator. So on the little youth proposal they did, I would encourage you to get involved with that. But as a rule, the school district and the city and all these organizations, we're pretty good 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. But if you start looking for something, you need to look at 24/7, 365 when you join on that youth plan. You mentioned the skate park. I'm old enough to remember when kids used to wear skateboarding is not a crime to school. I'm here to express my opposition to locating the disc golf park in the nature preserve. I believe there are 2 reasons, not directly related to the obvious, that this area is designated as a preserve or an open space. One would be the parking and traffic. Moore Road right there is about 3/500ths of a mile. It dead ends to a parking lot with 15 spaces. I went to the 3 other ones and looked at them. The minimum parking requirements they have are 100 at any of these other parks. They're proposing that you park along Moore Road. Moore Road is unimproved, no sidewalks, no bike lanes. Most of the places along the road where they say people could park, they can't always even get off the roadway. Right now, it's sort of a glorified combination bike path, walking pad, and some traffic on it. Probably it's most famous for the kids coming down in the evenings and practicing for sideshows, and then trying to see how fast they can accelerate and still make the stop sign at Joyner. There are tons of safety issues if you start loading up cars on both sides of that road. The advocates, proponents of the park have also said that they won't park in the residential areas. We know that's not true from the use of the dog park. And at the September Parks and Recreation Committee meeting, Mr. Boynton stated that he had been misquoted in the article in the Lincoln News Messenger, and that much of that information was not accurate. 3 weeks have gone by and I have seen no information presented to the paper to correct any of the things that are disinformation. It says that Mr. Boynton received approval to develop the course at the site. That is blatantly false. They approached, the people who wanted this activity approached the Parks Department, the Parks Committee in April. By May, Mr. Boynton had already contacted the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, focusing in on this site and only this site, as far as I can tell. One of the things he states is that from hole to hole, it would remain dirt. It's not dirt now, as you saw on the slides. That area will be trampled down. It will be dirt when they get done with it, but it is not dirt now. On May 11th, Mr. Boynton contacted them and wanted, is that my 3 minutes?
Yes.
Wow. Okay, I'll just leave a copy of this, but they've only looked at this one place. It's not, and the big question is what's changed? We were told you can't put your leaves over the fence that would decompose. Don't walk off the path. Now all of a sudden, we're going to run people through there based on their estimation would be somewhere between 65 million steps a year, with just 5,000 participants, up to as many as
Thank you.
270 million.
Thank you.
And I cannot believe that won't change that area.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. I do want to reply a little bit, and I'm going to let Sean respond just so there's some clarity. This is just one idea, and Mr. Boynton did contact the Corps of Engineers to get permission, but the council has not made a decision. Nobody has made a decision. So what he said was not untrue. And just because we haven't had another, or the newspaper didn't print another article, they print what they want, right? We're not responsible for what the newspaper prints. And so just because there hasn't been any more information coming forward does not mean that what he said was untrue or that we've made any decision, okay? And so it's still under consideration. I really appreciate your comments. I appreciate the comments that we've been getting, and all of that will be taken into consideration. But nothing that he said was a lie or was untrue. And was there something you wanted to comment to on that as well?
No, just I pointed out a number of times, this tends to happen because our messaging is from us. And so we can control, how we dictate that the process goes. As you mentioned, Mayor, we really can't control specifically what the paper prints or whether maybe they lead a story that's not fully baked and ready to go. And so, as I've mentioned a few times, the Parks and Rec Committee's job is to identify and create and propose recreational amenities for the community. That's it. Some of them are going to work and some of them are not going to work, but a part of the process is going through the, figuring out, A, is it feasible? B, is it something that the community is supportive of? C, is it something that we can afford to do? And we can't jump all the way to decision point D without doing A, B, and C first. And so we're in A and B land right now.
Okay, I would hope you'd ask them to at least look at other options for locations.
Well, we will. We're looking at all options. And so we appreciate your comments and everything will be taken under
And
consideration.
also look at
Okay.
Mr. Boynton's email stream with the
So
Army Corps. And
we need to move on, sir.
the response from them is supposedly approval is, can't find anything against it, so it must be okay.
Well, thank you, sir. Okay, we're going to move on to the last group here, and Jennifer Tandy, you are next.
Thank you very much for hearing me. My name is Jennifer Tandy, and I'm the administrator at Lincoln Christian Academy. And we were here just 5 short days ago during the planning committee meeting. And I just wanted to address some comments that were made there when parents were bringing their concerns with the development of the Deer Cross planning development next door, and how the planning committee treated us. And these are not only my families, but these are the children's parents who had very real concerns about this property. Especially, I know I was kind of confused because Mr. Lyons said that he was disappointed that an organization with the name Christian in it could act this way and present this information. I didn't see anything in the parent comments or in the, I'm too close to this, aren't I?
You're okay.
Anything in the parent comments or I didn't witness any behavior that would cause him to address that censorship. Also, I thought it was a little unprofessional, and it was based on, I believe, after talking with some people afterwards, an assumption that it came from the codes that are being presented were from our LCA administration, that they were from concerned parents. And he basically was saying that we lawyered up, and we had not. We were just addressing concerns. We teach respect for those in our community at our school. We treat others, even if we do not agree, with respect. And I expect the students, this is what we're teaching our students, this is what we expect from our staff and our parents. And I do not believe that we receive that respect from all of the members. There were a few. I was really surprised. This is the first time many of our parents had ever been to a planning committee meeting, and I was really disappointed in the performance and what they experienced when they were here. And I had a few takeaways. I should have done more research by moving the school as an administrator. I had time after moving our school there to check into the zoning. Okay, note taken. If had the property been developed, the legal parameters was allowed. And so basically addressing any concerns, bringing any concerns forward is kind of after the game plan has been set. And that basically my recourse is to work with a developer who has not yet contacted us, to my knowledge. Pastor Bill might have something in there. I just want to say that, and I have 5 seconds, if a parent brings a concern to me, I listen. Even if I've communicated with them fully, I explain where they can find the information. I ask how I can improve, and then I seek to restore that relationship. And so that's why I'm bringing these comments to the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Melanie Burchard.
Good evening. I think we have a great solution to our disc golf land use. It can be right next to, in the Deer Crossing, Deer Crossing development, build a beautiful park, have disc golf, some bocce ball, a nice Italian restaurant that would bring fine dining to our city. Be great. And bird watching. I was in attendance at the Planning Commission meeting last week and am shocked at the way the public was treated in that meeting by two commissioners specifically. After looking up the bylaws that are listed in the Lincoln City Handbook, there was action taken by that committee that was not in accordance with the bylaws that are written for that commission. We were treated as citizens by these people who represent our city in an inexcusable way. I think it's the council's job to appoint the commissioners who serve on the Planning Commission. And I would ask that you look at that video from the September 21st meeting. And I want to put on record that there was a comment made by the chair that is in violation of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. That is a serious issue that this city might have to deal with. I would also ask that both Commissioner Cross and Chair Lyons step down from that commission. Again, their comments that they made, the way they handled the public in that meeting is inexcusable. It's in violation of their bylaws and in violation of the way they're supposed to be representatives for our city. Secondly, I want to put on record that that evening, that commission pushed through the CEQA matter discussion for the development of Deer Crossing without requiring the developer to submit at least one requirement in the Lincoln City Municipal Code 18.32.110 number 8, where the developer is required to list information in relation to school and the development proposal. To my knowledge, that was not presented. That was either ignored or looked the other way by the Planning Commission. And they're going to waste your time bringing this development plan before you when it should not have been approved last week. So threefold. Chair Lyons, because of his actions, and Dan Cross, because of his actions and their violations of their responsibilities to the bylaws of the Planning Commission, need to step down immediately. And the passing of the CEQA matter in relation to the development plan last week on the 21st needs to be invalidated. It was not appropriate. Not all the municipal code actions were set forth. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Fran Nevis.
Well, I watched the Planning Commission 2 hours and 18 minutes, and I was very surprised that the plan development at Deer Crossing was so advanced, and the Lincoln Christian Living Center was only notified 13 days before the Planning Commission voted. Especially when the person on Zoom said it had been in the works prior to the pandemic. Pastor Rath said he had written a letter to John Sullivan asking about the property during that time, and he was not noted of this development. I watched the same procedure happen at Rockwell Lane and in Village 1 on Oak Tree Lane. I watched the houses come down on Level Road and the people, everything gone because the development is already set before people are notified. And they were said, well, we don't have to notify them. And they'll say, they should have known. It's been around since 2001, the 50-year plan. I didn't catch Rob's last name. He sat right there. But he said he hadn't even visited the school or church property. He didn't know there was a chain fence between the Deer Crossing and the school. He didn't know there were 2 playgrounds and a lunch area there, adjacent behind the proposed buildings with an alley. I'm wondering about the environmental impact report as well, EIR, as you all know, because it said that it was okay, but it was in 2000. And as Mrs. Burge mentioned, a lot of things happen in the groundwater. In fact, St. Joseph had to pay the Army engineer $400,000 for a soil analysis because of the groundwater from the Titan missile site on Oak Tree Lane. And I'm wondering if St. Joseph's has been notified of the Deer Crossing development. This is my 12th year at the school. This is the school, Lincoln Christian Academy, that puts the flags on all the veterans' graves at the cemetery on Veterans Day and Memorial Day. A picture's worth 1,000 words. You won't forget that, right? This is the school that tripled in attendance during COVID. This is the school that brings cookies and sings Christmas carols at City Hall, the fire station, the Chamber of Commerce, and other places downtown during the holidays. Parents bring children to this school from Beale Air Force Base and Sacramento. One of the weekly volunteers drives all the way from Lake of the Pines every week, 90 miles round trip. Volunteer. If you continue with this plan, I would ask the developer to pay to move the playground and the lunch area before construction begins. You could also stop the sale of alcohol at the convenience store and the proposed drive-through restaurant. And
10
the only
seconds,
thing I
Fran.
want to say is I want to thank Eric Johnson and Tony Manning for voting against the project. And I want to thank Michelle Hutchinson for at least proposing an 8-foot wall between the school property and the development. Thank you.
Thank you, Fran. Okay, Steve Ernst.
Madam Mayor, council members, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Steve Ernst and I'm a resident here in Lincoln. And I was here last week or a few days ago for the council or the chamber, whatever.
Planning
council
Commission.
can. Thank you. And I believe all of you received a copy of my letter, including city manager and city attorney. So I'm not going to reiterate everything that is in this letter, but being a retired cop for 30 years doing vice narcotics, I was subject to some rude comments, but never in a professional setting like this. That was just unmentionable for them to say what they said and the tone that they said it, the scolding that they gave us was ridiculous. It should never have happened. It shouldn't happen in a setting like this. And I'm not gonna, like I said, I don't want to reiterate everything that was said here. I agree with everybody that that has spoken, as the Mr. Lyons and Mr. Cross should not be sitting representing the city of Lincoln on a commission like that. One other thing that did bother me is this master plan that was spoken of. This development was approved 20 some odd years ago. Lincoln is not the same today that it was 20 years ago. When they want to develop a market convenience store with alcohol, transients, the minors, the drugs, the prostitution, the fights, the crime, chief knows what kind of things occur there. That was my job. I did that for 30 years. I know what happens in those parking lots. And for anything like that to be developed next to a church or a school is ridiculous. It should not happen. But main thing, those two commissioners need to be dismissed. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Bill Rath.
Bill Rath, pastor of Lincoln Christian Life Center.
Tonight, I'm here to officially lodge a protest in regard to the Planning Commission meeting on September 21st, 2022. It was obvious to everyone attending and watching that the deck was stacked against us. We all felt that the decision had already been made and the public comment was a necessary yet undesired requirement of this meeting. Many of the commission members were not only aggravated by our presence, but angry that we would dare come to question a decision they were going to make. So much so that we were ridiculed, harassed, and belittled the whole meeting. From being chastised about not filling out a yellow card to speak, to telling the teachers who came that they had learned a valuable lesson tonight and now they could go teach their students this lesson they learned. We were mocked and told we were like people who moved next door to an airport and complained about the noise, effectively calling us foolish and unreasonable. We were categorized negatively with the description as people who say, "not in my backyard," which is a dog whistle statement about people who are narrow-minded and even bigoted. We were told we were like children who play a game and don't know how the game is, and don't like how the game is going, so we want to change the rules in the middle of the game. And worst of all, our character was impugned and defamed by Commissioner Lyons. He criticized our Christianity, saying he couldn't believe people who had Christian in the name of their organizations would behave this way. Then after the meeting, said to someone he intentionally said those remarks to be defaming, hurtful, and critical. I'm not sure if everyone here is aware of the criteria for a defamation of character lawsuit, so let me tell you. It's when someone makes a false statement or purported fact about you, when that statement was made published to a third party. The person who made the statement did so negligently, recklessly, or intentionally, and that the result of that statement, your reputation was damaged. I think you can make a case for all of those qualifications being met. Commissioner Lyons also had a publicly stated relationship with the architect that he said went back at least 45 years and then voted yes on the project. There seems to be some conflict of interest there. Speaking of conflict of interest, Commissioner Gilbert, as he stated, had been part of a Lincoln government for 45 years, meaning any master plan that has been adopted was something he intimately was a part of. How and why would he vote against something he had already decided was a good plan? Speaking of the master plan was developed 20 or so years ago with some review after the plan. But why are we beholden to a 20 or 30-year-old plan? The city of Lincoln has changed quite a lot in 20 years. I know in Roseville, they tried to get gas stations on the corners in neighborhoods and the city residents stood up and they did not do that. Maybe not all plans are still in the best interest of the city. And as we have all heard, even good plans need to be changed sometimes. I want to speak to also what some of the city staff said. There was a comment by the senior planner that he was unaware of the school at the church. I find it disingenuous that in all the trips he took up and down Highway 193 and McBean Park Drive for the current developments, that he didn't notice the huge sign that is there on the front of the church property that says there's a school. Also, to say we were given notice is true in the law, but the church was here before the city was here. We were unincorporated Placer County when the church was built in 1972 and 73. For the city to ignore this organization back when the master plan was put in place, and then again today, an organization that, by the way, was founded in part by Miss Gladding, in my mind is a travesty. I find it hard to believe that anyone could review the video of this meeting and come to any other conclusion that we were not given a fair public hearing, unless this decision should be reversed by this honorable council. This is not a sour grape. Sometimes things don't go your way and you lose. But when a decision is made that is such an egregious injustice, then we must change the decision or at least revisit the decision. Thank you for your time and thank you for letting me go over.
Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else in the council chambers? We have no more cards for that, but you can still speak if you want to. Okay, Gwen, is there anybody on Zoom?
Yes, we do have 3 hands raised. Byron, please go ahead. So it looks like he's having some problems unmuting.
Come back to you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you muted yourself again.
We'll skip to Kim McEwen. Please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm talking about the disc golf. I'm actually Kim's wife, Julie McEwen. We live on Green Ravine, backing up to the Auburn Ravine Park. And on past environmental impact studies, the city of Lincoln has promised their support in preserving the heritage oaks and threatened or endangered vegetative habitat from destruction. The city has promised to support the management of wetland and repairing plant communities for passive recreation. The definition of passive recreation is amenities such as walking and bike trails, benches, and viewing areas to enhance the Auburn Ravine corridor for the community. I repeat, passive recreation is amenities such as walking and bike trails, benches, and viewing areas, not disc golf and non-passive activity. Wildlife movement corridors are considered an important ecological resource. Movement corridors provide favorable locations for wildlife to travel between different habitat areas, such as foraging sites, breeding sites, cover areas, and preferred summer and winter range locations. Areas of human disturbance, like disc golf, can change wildlife habitats and impact wildlife movement between areas of suitable habitat. Auburn Ravine is one of these precious wildlife movement corridors. These natural communities within western Placer County require large blocks of intact habitat to maintain their biological function. These preserve reduce edge effects, minimize human intrusion, and allow for largely unobstructed movement of plant and wildlife populations. Auburn Ravine provides a habitat for special status species, like the Swainson hawk and other animals, and harbors a variety of habitats for fish and wildlife. The channels of this ravine, as well as the extensive wetlands located within their floodplains, are some of the highest quality wetlands and habitat that remain in western Placer County. My question to you, is your commitment to preserve Auburn Ravine changing? How can having a non-passive activity, disc golf, protect our grasses, our nesting areas, and our special status animals? This doesn't even take into account the lack of parking, bathrooms, and crowd control. The estimated number of people expected to participate was between 10 to 15,000 people per year. This is a huge impact on a nature preserve. To allow this disc golf in Auburn Ravine would be an environmental crime. We are not against having disc golf course in Lincoln, just not in the Auburn Ravine Nature Preserve. There has got to be a better location, and we beg you to find it. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Mr. Chapman, are you with us now?
He's not on, Mayor.
Okay.
We do have another person. CA, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Carly. I was also at the Planning Commission last Wednesday and was absolutely appalled by the behavior of Commissioner Lyons and Commissioner Cross and their unprofessionalism, to say the least. We were bullied. We were treated very disrespectfully when we ourselves were very respectful. I appreciate Commissioner Manning and Commissioner Johnson apologizing for their co-commissioner's behavior. It was completely out of line. I just can't believe that we were spoke to the way that we were, especially because they are representing the city and they're making the city look bad. And like Commissioner Manning had said originally, they work for the citizens of this town, not the other way around. We were all there out of concern, valid concern at that. I find it very confusing, upsetting that Commissioner Lyons represents the developer and how that's not a conflict of interest. I also find it unfair, to say the least, that Lyons gave him permission to speak after, but gave nobody else sitting there as the public to speak. But he said, as your representative, to the architect on Zoom, he said, as your representative, I give you permission to speak, but nobody else was allowed to. And then Commissioner Cross telling us that if we didn't like the way things were, that we could leave, very, very disrespectfully. Many of us, like everyone else has said before me, had no idea of the actual process of filling out a yellow card because most of us did not know. Very few days before that this commission meeting was going to be happening. So we, basically dropped everything and came into the meeting to represent our concerns as the purpose of the meeting. And they were all dismissed, Cross telling us that our only issue is that we are acting out of fear. Well, we have valid concerns. And if that's fear, then that's a valid concern, because the safety of our children is absolutely always first. And if we don't fight for our kids, who will? And the fact that all of us came together so quickly to attend that meeting last week speaks volumes for our purpose and our concern for our children's safety. That gas station being an ARCO AM/PM is a huge concern. The ARCO AM/PM at the Lowe's Shopping Center has a lot of crime. You can look at the call logs for Lincoln PD. It's public knowledge. Anyone can look at that. And our police department is already spread thin and our resources are already minimal for how big the city is growing. So please don't add more to that to their plate. They already have enough. And please don't do this for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, Mr. Chapman is back on. Let me see if we can get him. You should be able to unmute yourself, Byron.
Was there another person with a hand raised?
Yeah, no, just him.
Just him, okay.
Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Chapman,
Oh, that's weird. We had him and then he was gone. Okay. All right, any other comments? Last call. Okay, I'm not going to make a lot of comments about the planning commission because I don't think it'll be appropriate for me to do so, just to say that I did watch it and we take it very seriously. So I'm going to leave it at that. And I thank you all for coming in and sharing your concerns with us. Okay. Okay, we are moving on to item number 8, the consent agenda. We do have one member of the public who's asked to pull item 8M. So all matters on the consent agenda are considered routine business and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a member of the city council or resident requests a specific item be removed from the consent agenda for separate action. Any items removed will be considered after the remainder of the consent agenda. So we have 8M pulled. Are there any from the council? No. Okay. Any other from the public? Okay. So we will hold on to 8M and I will receive a motion to approve the rest of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
yes, Councilmember Carl Skint,
Yes.
Councilmember Lauritsen.
Yes.
Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Silhai.
Yes.
And Mayor Andriana.
Yes. Okay, so let's do it this way. Ms. Bouchard, would you like to tell us what your question was about it, and then we can answer questions?
I guess to put it very succinctly, as a member of the Toll Bridges community, my concern is that the slogan for Lincoln will no longer be Live, Love Lincoln. It will be Live ARCO AM/PM Lincoln. We don't need another gas station in Toll Bridges. We don't need gas stations on our corners in our city. It would be nice to see really an award-winning developer come in with a great plan for some of these retail commercial properties that we have and build something else besides a gas station and a mini mart. You know, it's been mentioned, we don't need to tax our dear police department anymore, but we don't need gas station centers that are drawing the kinds of things that we know are coming through our gas stations and our convenience stores. We need no more of that. Certainly not in any new Toll Bridges plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to comment on that? Because
Yeah, Christine and I were just conferring for a second because Pappas Development owns quite a bit of land, real estate in this area. And I think that this agreement that's on consent this evening actually is a different geographic parcel than the AM.
The AM/PM gas station that's currently in development is not on a parcel that's part of this development agreement
okay,
in 12 Bridges.
okay. Yeah, I don't think that's this. Did you understand that? It's.
I understand.
That's okay. Thank you. We appreciate your comments though. Okay. Did you guys have any questions or comments about that? Okay. Yes.
Well, I'm really glad you brought up that AM/PM market because my 3 minutes were up, I didn't get to say, there's 6 service station convenience stores that sell alcohol on Lincoln Boulevard and another gas station planned for Sierra College in 193. So I don't see why you need to put another gas station halfway between Lincoln Boulevard and 193. And on top of that, one of the parents at the Planning Commission mentioned the fact that the governor just said, we're all going all electric cars by 2035. So why are we putting in so many more gas stations? Thank you.
Thanks, Fran. That really, I think it was not the same topic, but I appreciate your comments. Okay, I'll take a motion to approve 8M.
So moved.
Second. Okay, roll call, please.
Yes, Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Silhai.
Yes.
Councilmember Carl Skint,
Yeah.
Councilmember Lauritsen.
Yes.
And Mayor Andriotta.
Yes. Okay, item number 9, public hearings. We do not have any this evening. Item 10, general business. 10A is the city council discussion to provide edits and consider approval of resolution 2022-227, approving the draft response to the Placer Grand Jury homelessness in Placer County recommendation 5, homelessness grand jury response. And then our city manager, Sean Scully, will give this staff report.
Thank you very much, Mayor. So as council is well aware, the Placer Grand Jury issued their book of reports a few months ago. There was one report that was directly specific to Lincoln, titled Lincoln, a City in Transition, which has already been, I have already responded to. It required my response, and they also requested a response from the mayor. Separate of that, there is a full report on homelessness in Placer County. And while the city was not notified, typically when your organization is the subject of a grand jury report or investigation, and there are recommendations and responses required, you get a notice, a formal notice that says, we've issued this report and we expect a response from you by this date. And you're supposed to transmit it to the presiding judge. We did not get that in this homelessness in Placer County, but fortunately, a number of the other jurisdictions that I spent a lot of time communicating with caught it. And we all realized that there was one recommendation out of the 9 that were listed in the report that required that all jurisdictions and their governing bodies respond to the following. Recommendation number 5 states, by January 1st of 2023, all cities and jurisdictions in Placer County shall identify and apply for grants, allocate funds, and establish their own municipal low barrier facility. Okay, well, where do I start? It's a very difficult, the tone of the recommendation is based in wanting to see a actual achievable response to the very serious problems that this county has to deal with regard to homelessness. And to find a place to house individuals that have to live in very difficult circumstances. And so I won't comment on any of that specificity beyond that. What I'll just say from a practical perspective is that it would be impossible, even if the city council were to have ordered me yesterday, to stand that up within 3 months. Grant cycles are not like convenience stores. They're not always open. They close and reopen and close and reopen. In addition, there's a process to apply, there's a process to be funded, and then there's the whole component of trying to figure out where you may choose to site a low barrier shelter. So I think I can fairly tell you that it would be, if perhaps we had to provide no other services for the next 90 days, we might be able to pull it off, but it's an unachievable goal. So the draft response that I've attached to your staff report, which I won't read, basically tries to identify that from a practical perspective, it simply is not something that we can do. What I will say, though, is that I tried to add in some color into the letter that identifies the good work that has been done by Lincoln, by Mana, who is here this evening, and her group, by the Homelessness Task Force, and by city council members that are very involved in regional discussions. And that this is not a response that's putting our head in the sand and saying we're not interested in doing anything. It's a response that says if we're going to do something, it has to be well thought out, and planned with wraparound services that actually elevate people out of homelessness permanently. So I tried to synthesize that into the letter, and if the city council would like to provide me edits, I'm happy to make them. We seek your approval so that I can transmit this tomorrow and meet our timeline.
Thank you. I'm happy with it. I thought it was perfect.
I'm good with it, but, my attitude is no solution is not a solution. We have to come up with a solution.
I think we've been working on solutions. I think we've got an ongoing solutions, working with the county, with the task force, working with Christine's team, with Mana's team. We've lowered our number of homelessness over the last couple of years. We still have a lot of work to do, as everybody does, but we're making progress. So I think we're making good headway.
I love the letter.
Mhm.
I'm surprised that there are no edits in it.
Stop looking at me, Dan. Sean is very good with not having any comma splices.
What is particularly good is that the letter in response to the request or requirement showed that there was a lot more thought put into the response than there was to come up with a requirement.
Yeah.
So I think we accomplished that.
Yep, I agree.
And maybe in the future, they will think things through and not do this, all jurisdictions do this without acknowledging that jurisdictions are different. That's why they are jurisdictions.
Yeah, and I think to your point and to Bill's point, like no solution isn't a solution, but like the part that's missing is the local. It has to be a local solution and it can't be a dictate. That it's like a cookie cutter approach. We're making progress and then we'll continue to make progress, but it has to be appropriate or it's useless.
Well, I also find it interesting that in their report or in their investigation or whatever it was, they take into account nothing at all of what we've already done, the work that we've been doing. So I appreciated the letter. I thought it was very well said. Thank you, Gwen.
So I agree. The letter is probably much more thoughtful than my response would have been, knowing all that we have done, all the good work that's being done, and I believe, potentially workable solutions we're working our way towards now that are feasible. Not just feasible given a funding source, which is the real challenge here. If we're all honest, the county receives the majority of the funding coming down from the state. We don't. And so we're going to have to work in partnership with all of this. Health and Human Services will have to provide, regardless of what we do with the shelter here, we'll have to provide the majority of the services that are receivable within that facility, probably run the facility on our behalf as well. But I think what bothers me through this process, and it's not just this, and I'll try not to beat up on grand juries as a whole too much, but they are a group of well-meaning citizens that are gathered anew each year with no knowledge or expertise in all of the given areas that they jump into. And as a result, my suspicion is they did not know all that is being done and wrote something that was very well intended. We've got to address this problem and you should be doing it very, very soon, without realizing the barriers that exist and the efforts that are being made currently in a very regional and cooperative way thus far.
Very good. Okay, any public comment on this item? Yes, Mana, please.
Yes.
No, come to the microphone and speak, please. Thank you.
So I am Mana Bass. I lead the Adopt a Creek program, and I appreciate your appreciation of us. We are a group of well-meaning citizens. We're just citizens who for over 3 years weekly have done what we've done. I would just implore you that if Lincoln waits on the county, we'll still be waiting. Okay. If we, and I'll take responsibility, along with Scott Boynton and Christine and task force, if we waited till we had all the answers to begin partnering with our homeless to pick up the trash that they pick up that we resourced 3 years ago, we might still be waiting. Okay, so my group and me feel very passionate that it's time we start really looking at what we can do in Lincoln. Okay, along with our county, which we currently work very closely with our county. So that's all I'm going to say is please don't wait. If we would have waited, we would not be where we are. And we have some fantastic opportunities right now with the relationship and the cooperation, the collaboration that we have achieved in the last 3 years. Please don't wait.
Thank you, Mana. Appreciate that. All right, any other public comment on this? Anybody on Zoom? Nope. Okay, bring it back to the council. So are we voting on this or just giving you direction to? send it?
Yeah, I think there's a resolution.
It's a resolution? Okay, so.
Move approval of the resolution.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Sure. Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Silhai, Councilmember Carl Skip,
Yeah.
Councilmember Lauritsen,
Yes.
and Mayor Andriotta.
Yes, okay, yes, thank you for that. All right, item 10B, this is just a workshop, no resolution. We are going to give feedback on the concept of whether to invest resources and time in exploring the establishment of a process to allow permanent or semi-permanent parklets and other use of public space by downtown businesses within the downtown area. And so City Manager Sean Scully will also give us this presentation.
Great, thanks. And I'm now feeling kind of bummed out because I think that the aspect ratio I picked for this presentation is too big. So I'm sorry about that. We'll hopefully.
Parkle is kind of cute though.
Parkle presentate. That's really embarrassing. I was so excited about this design. Oh, well. Yeah, can we just, yeah, thanks. Peter, yeah, that's perfect. It's not quite as good, but it's okay. Okay, so, oh, you're the best. I'll give you a high five after this. Okay, so I've been approached by a couple different businesses in the downtown, sort of inquiring whether the city would perhaps consider thinking about a more permanent or semi-permanent process to develop parklets in the downtown area in particular. And so I'm going to share a little bit about some of the history there and then what I see as some of the obstacles, and I'm going to seek a little direction at the end. So you can click the next one, Peter. So parklets or streeteries, which is actually a term that Councilmember Joyner explained to me, which I think is, I'm starting to grow on me a little bit. They have a long history in urban planning. Depending on how you define them, they go back a long ways. Interestingly, though, they're really just extensions of public space for the use of commercial areas. Sometimes they're simply lounge areas that are in commercial or residential areas. And they're typically used within dense urban environments where you don't have plenty of communal space already designed in. San Francisco was credited for developing the first of them. And if you drive through that city, especially these days, they're all over the place. And they've kind of populated all over. But if you ever have traveled to Europe, like I have, you'll notice, especially in cities like Paris and others, that they've been eating and communing on sidewalks for probably hundreds of years or longer. Anywho, After the COVID-19 pandemic, one of the ways that local governments tried to react to the closure of restaurants was to create space outside as sort of a patch to allow those businesses to remain open. And I think Lincoln did that for some time before the program wound down. You can go to the next slide. And so what's happened though since then is many communities up and down the state and really nationwide have said, you know, the light bulb just went off for us. This was actually great. It was great to have these outside. People preferred, especially when you live in areas like this where you have maybe as many as 9 or 10 months of really great weather in the afternoons and evenings. It's people prefer to sit outside and experience the downtown that way. And so many cities have just let them stay forever, or they've created programs to create more nicely created and designed parklets, which I'll show you a few examples of. There are all kinds of processes and all types of pilot programs that I found throughout the state. Some are very involved, some are less so involved. Some communities, for example, Santa Barbara, may even consider literally shutting down thoroughfares forever to traffic and using those spaces as kind of commercial cores. You can go to the next slide. So one of the things in some of the preliminary research that I did is, you know, design is key. Here's just a few examples. A couple of these are in San Francisco and other communities, but you could see it's everything from sort of cafe style seating to those triangular benches, which are really more just communal space. And then you have the stand-up option sort of in the middle, but you can see all types of design. You have concrete design there, you have wooden barrier design, you have a sort of a distressed metal, and then you even have flush platforms in the top left example. If you go to the next slide. So design is key. I'm going to add emphasis there, because here's one that maybe we wouldn't want to see around Lincoln. But you know, the reason I put it in was mainly just as a joke, but to also illustrate that if Lincoln was going to consider this, I think that you only really are going to add value if you make sure that the design requirements reflect what you think is going to be nice for your downtown. You go to the next slide. There's a ton of considerations here. There's a community desire for this. You have to balance safety and economic concern. Parking loss, of course, that's going to be discussion. It's a discussion with the downtown folks, I'm guessing nearly every meeting. Application process and design review, transfer of risk and indemnity provisions, engineering related considerations, drainage, traffic. There are ADA considerations. And then just the reality that's kind of hard for some businesses is that some areas are just not appropriate for them. They just are not safe, and they're not located in a safe area. Maybe it's too tight of a radius. And so it's not going to be, if this was a program the council wanted to move forward with, it would not be something that everybody has an equal opportunity at. It's going to be location dependent. Next slide. So direction needed. Really the reason I agendized this is because I'd had requests, and I need to know if the city council wants me to spend time and staff resources on looking into this as a priority, because it's going to be somewhat involved, and we don't like to needlessly burn through resources if it's not something that the council is interested in considering at this time. If you wanted us to explore it, we would bring you back the parameters under which all of those other considerations are addressed. So I got to hit the road. I've got to go talk with the DLA. I've got to go talk with the chamber. We've got to, crowdsource some feedback from the community on it, and then build some programs that maybe are reflective of other successful ones locally or regionally. You could also say, look, we think it's a really neat idea, but it's just not a priority for at this time, and we'll revisit it at some point later. Or third, you could direct us to address the matter as part of our downtown plan update. So provided that we're successful in our funding for our redesign of our downtown design guidelines and plan, we could build in this as a component of it as well, or some combination of 1, 2, and 3. So that's in a nutshell my presentation. I just would add that I do think that regardless of your decision, the plaza is a component here that needs to be discussed. Your alleyways are a component here that need to be looked at. And I don't think it's my belief that downtowns generally cannot be successful unless you have a vibrant outdoor environment where people can enjoy it. So.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Councilmember Lordson, would you like to start with comments or questions?
Yeah, I have to admit, I've seen parklets in other locations and they do seem to work. And there's probably some areas in this area that, in this city or the downtown area that would work, maybe in connection with Pierman Plaza. So.
I'm gonna be the curmudgeon here probably. I have like significant concerns with it from a just practical and policy matter. One, I think that our downtown in particular is like the heart of our city. And I agree with you that outdoor spaces are what's attractive. So why are we not trying to work towards incorporating that as a permanent fixture in our built environment? And when it's done right and it's done safe, you make the decisions to perhaps get rid of the parking and extend the sidewalk so that there's permanent outdoor seating. I have significant concerns on the safety aspect, which I know you're probably sick of hearing because I've met with you a few times and talked to you about it. But I will say I feel validated in it because the best breakout session at the league was on this issue. And it was everything that I was worried about plus some. So now I have even more worries, which I think if we do it right, then they can all be mitigated. I mean, it was very clear that it's possible to mitigate it, but if you're going to go through all of the work to be sure that you mitigate it, it's significant staff sources to make it look right. It's expensive. I don't personally want to go downtown and see a bunch of random concrete barriers. They're ugly. They're okay in some urban cities because they have like the graffiti and it's like stylized, but that's not Lincoln's vibe. Like we're like a hometown little town, which we talk all the time about how we want to preserve our hometown little town. To me, like concrete barrier on the street does not really scream like, Hallmark Christmas. I don't know. I don't like it. I also think that there's a lot of liability. They're not safe. You have to really, like I was made clear in that presentation too, right? It's the spacing of the barriers. How much parking are you willing to take away? It should be more substantial than you probably think. Like, what is it constructed? Where is it appropriate? How are we going to like standardize it? Like there are some corners where people just take them too fast. Do I want my kid outside dining on a bench there with a concrete barrier? Not really. If we expanded the sidewalk, it wouldn't take that away because the street would no longer be where I'm eating. I think that it should be a long-term conversation that we have. And maybe you have a pilot program once we work through all of the issues to get to building it out. So you know where it can be and where it can't, right? It can't all happen overnight. But I also don't think that it's one of those things where it's like, oh, wow, somebody had a good idea and it's happening somewhere else. Let's do it right now. There's stormwater permitting things. There's runoff issues. So, you're going to have grease in the sidewalks and then that's going to run down. And now all of a sudden you're out of compliance with the State Water Resources Control Board. Like there are significant things that can happen from having a proliferation of outdoor dining in places where it wasn't intended to dine. There's potential rodent issues. Like, I just think there's a lot of issues that, not to say I don't want to do it, but to say I don't want to race through it. And I personally love the idea of if we're going to do a downtown, master plan specific to it, what can that look like? And what can we work towards? And how do we make it permanent? And how do we build it in where it looks nice? And it's somewhere where I can take my kid and I can go, grab whatever food they want to eat and we dine outside and I'm not worried about a car coming and crashing into them. So I'm done now.
Everybody's looking at me, great.
No, I'm looking at both of you if you have questions or comments.
Thank you for.
Microphone.
Thank you, Ms. Selhai, for taking my thunder and saying what you were worried about. I there are a lot of towns that I've visited that have revitalized their downtown using some aspect of what we're calling parklets here, whether it's street rerouting or whatever. I think he's looking for direction. I think to do it right, so that we're sure that we retain the long-term goal that we all strive for every day, which is keep Lincoln, but better. I think the way to do it is through the downtown business restructure, the master plan for downtown. It is it's a downtown area thing geographically. I don't see it as applicable in the outlying shopping areas. I don't see the need for it, because if it becomes a standard way of having restaurants, they're going to build them in the parking into the shopping center. So my suggestion for direction is just that. I think it's important, but I think that it needs to be a measured design, a measured approach. And so I'd say do it coincident with and as a major part of the downtown master plan.
Can I ask a question to follow up on that though? Because if we're going to have a downtown master plan and we're talking parklets, to me, that is temporary. So why are we not just looking at the built environment and what we want it to look like permanent? Like we're talking taking away parking spaces and constructing barriers on what? On a part-time until we can build it out, on a like 20 years from now, we're still going to have parklets. Like what are we talking for it, right? Like what is the expectation? If I'm a business owner, that like, this is now my space. How long do I get to have this eating space? Like, do I owe the residents when it's in the public right of way because I'm making profit off of this public space that I'm now inhabiting? Like, I think there's like, I just need more information.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reason I'm asking. If you want me to get you more information, I
think
don't
it
have
should
it all.
be-
But to answer your question, like, so the models exist on the spectrum, right? So they're the ones that you kind of identified that you're not a big fan of. K-rails is the term, and they're very ugly and they're really used for mostly engineering and Caltrans work, road work. Yeah, they're very good at stopping vehicles. We know this. And then there's the boutique ones, which we showed some pictures of those. And then there's permanent forever parklets that are forever. And to answer your other question in terms of models, there's models that identify that the reason that these exist typically in downtown urban environments is that everything is built to zero lot line. So there is no space unless you go up to create that environment. And so I've seen models, as I did a little research, that where in order to keep a business's right to use them, they pay a certain dollar fee per parking space that they take up per month in perpetuity. So kind of like a lease almost. I've seen ones that have no cost because it's identified as just sort of a common public good and they can't restrict anybody from using them. So like some of those that I showed you are not necessarily owned by any business. They're just for the use of whoever happens to be there. So it could be any variety of them. And I think like the downtown plan idea is interesting because if the concept is you want to do EDC has been using this term a lot lately, placemaking. And if that's the idea is that you want to create a place, then what you really want is a long-term solution. And while we may call it a parklet, really it's like a public improvement that stays there forever.
So I'm just going to say, I have a concern with that. If we're looking at placemaking, I don't have a concern with it. If as through the general plan, this is how we want our downtown to develop. And while we wait for the resources to expand this to be a permanent, al fresco dining area with like permanent sidewalks, we have a pilot program to see how and where it works. I'm fine with that being part of the solution towards a permanent built, placemaking entity. I don't like the idea of it as just being a permanent plan. I don't think that's a plan for our downtown. I don't like the idea of that being a plan for our downtown. I don't identify with that. I also feel like I love it in Paris, but I'm at risk of getting hit by a Vespa, right? When I'm at a cafe in Paris, not like an SUV. So I think there's different safety considerations and we need to make the place, we need to make it safe and visually appealing and decide just like what it's going to go. So I like the idea of addressing it personally through that process. And if that means that there's a pilot program towards an end, but if it's not towards an end, I'm personally, I know I'm out in like 2 months, but I'm not interested.
This is a huge conversation. And it's not the first time that we've taken it up. The parklets discussion was had in a very new sort of way after San Francisco started doing it. And we were chatting it up, trying to figure out if it was a good fit for us. And at the time, the decision was, yeah, we're not San Francisco, and no, it's probably not a good fit for us. But those things have evolved. Even the products have evolved. So I make some very clear distinctions. When I use the word streetery, it's just that. It is food and beverage related. A parklet is that little triangular area that you showed that was just seating, just an area where people could go hang out. They're two very different things. And you'll see them, probably the best place I've seen parklets done was Laguna Beach. Not Laguna Beach, the next town over, doesn't really matter. Very small, beautifully done with brick and mosaic inlays of the historic events within their community, just gorgeous. Unfortunately, not well maintained, so dirty and sticky and such. But I think my real point is this. For me, there are streeteries, there are parklets, there are environments in which the streetery concept of taking up a bit of a couple of parking spaces doesn't really work well, such as out on Lincoln Boulevard. Then we ought to be talking about how can we facilitate rooftop dining? How can we facilitate encroachment over the sidewalks for balconies, that type of thing. So it's a bigger outdoor accessibility issue, I think. So let me ask you a question. Do we have anybody currently who is seeking some type of?
Yes.
Okay. Is it just the one? Is it multiples
One business and another that's very interested.
in the same spot?
No, along Fifth.
Along Fifth, okay. So there are bump outs right along Sixth that could have some type of solution put in there that would resolve your worry about somebody cutting a corner and coming in.
Those are one-offs.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm trying to figure out what
Where
can
it
we
could
do
be
in the short
appropriate,
term?
right? If there are places where it's appropriate.
What can we do in the short term as
Yeah.
you keep throwing the word priority at me, which causes me, this full well, to shove it way down, because is it a priority?
Right, compared to
No.
everything else we have on your plate.
But I think it is an essential element of placemaking and economic development and planning for our historic downtown and creating that. The thing that makes you drive by and say, this place looks cool, what's going on here? Because you can see it, right? It comes out, you can see it. We can have wonderful businesses that are packed, but somebody just passing through inside those walls isn't going to see that. And so these vibrant outdoor spaces are.
And
essential.
everything I'm hearing is I feel like it's appropriate in the downtown master plan discussion, because in addition to rooftop dining, hangover encroachments over the sidewalk, also our parking ordinances downtown, how many parking spots per, right? Maybe we need to give up some parking so that we have more public spaces, but I think that they're all policy discussions that belong together. And if we silo them, I think we get it wrong.
So he's going to hate me for this, but increasingly, as we have this conversation and others, there was a plan once upon a time for a parking structure right across the street. It's why the city bought the land. It's why the parking lot exists. And maybe there is, through all the infrastructure money coming down, a way that we can leverage some of that add additional parking to our downtown and then claim a few of these spaces along the way.
So-
Yeah, just think on it. Just think on it.
So,
Without a master plan.
No,
Well,
with a
so-
master
so
plan.
my question is-
Absolutely with a master plan.
so when will we know about the Green Means Go grant that we applied for that we would use for our downtown plan?
I'm sorry, I think it, do you know, Paul? I think it closes, we have to have the application completed. I think we have a couple weeks.
Okay.
And then I would say by the end of the year would be my guess.
I
we'll
would,
have an
I would
award.
expect the awards to be announced
Okay.
first of the year.
Okay. So my thought is that I think this is something that we want to include in our downtown plan when we do it. But I like the idea. I'm with Councilmember Sohai on the safety issues. It needs to look nice and it needs to be safe whatever we do. And I'm a little hesitant to tell you, this is a priority. We want you to like spend a whole lot of time on it right now, because I know that you don't have a lot of time to spend on this right now. It's a great idea. We would like it, but it's not a top priority. What I want to know though is what we were just saying, the one particular business and then the other one that are asking, that are giving us renderings, that want to do something right now. Is it possible to figure out something for them in the short term as a trial? Like, we're going to do this, we'll see if it works, see how it goes for you, how it goes for the city. Is that a possibility?
You're the governing body. Yes, of course, it's a possibility.
I'm loud enough without it, but is that I feel like that becomes the one-off. And
yeah.
now we're not thinking through the potential risks. We're not thinking through the potential, all of the different scenarios. And then we're holding businesses to
Well,
different
that's-
standard. And one of the businesses that I'm aware of, I actually think is a very dangerous site to have it.
Well, that's why.
So I
I'm-
don't know that we
Well, that's
can.
why I'm asking him to look into that particular one as a trial and see if it is feasible. Because that particular business owner is asking, very interested. And so I get what you're saying and I don't disagree with you.
I'll be honest, I, as much as the reason that I agendized this isn't because I was bored like Thursday and thought like, what can I throw on the agenda? It's that I don't like to unilaterally decide something that really is a policy decision and just sort of say, yeah, we're not doing that right now,
Yeah.
business. I say, okay, if that's something that you want me to spend time on, then that's what we're going to do. I think that it would be a challenge to create a special circumstance for one,
Okay.
if we're going to create something that you can truly be proud of
Okay.
down the road.
The idea, to me, a pilot program is something that you're doing to do a proof of concept. And if it works, you're going to replicate the hell out of it.
Mhm.
I don't, without the master plan, you don't want to go there, because the work to do a true pilot program, build a prototype, is all of the long-term coverage that you have to protect yourself forever. So I think it's not a priority, but it's important. I think if we get the grant, we'll have some funding. And maybe we can use some other infrastructure funding so that we do it quickly and have the resources.
It could be too, we're talking about parklets and streeteries like in the street, but it could be that maybe we are able to explore letting people have a few little cafe, like little tables on the sidewalk. I don't know what that could look like, but at least there's not cars in the street, right? It might impact the walkability. I don't know what that looks like, but maybe there's a compromise that doesn't include like, hey, that's a great idea. Other people are doing it. Now let's put you in my street before I decide what all of my safety implications are and what the built environment looks like and all of these other
We could
things.
even remodel some of the alleys and create those things.
Where if we shut it down to traffic,
That's what I'm
then,
saying,
right, like,
traffic, yeah.
like I think that there are alternative solutions potentially, particularly in the downtown like center that could be ripe for things like that. But I don't know that just like what we're envisioning as like a streetery is appropriate for an ongoing use. So maybe there's some mitigation in the middle that we haven't discussed yet.
So I'm going to jump in because the conversation is heading towards hardscapes, very, very expensive hardscapes that we're not going to see manifest for a very long time. So what can we do in the meantime? There are products. I sent some links to Sean, a company out of Wyoming or Montana that makes modular steel framed safe units, integrated umbrellas that can be added to or taken away from. They are designed to go into diagonal parking spaces and take up 2 spaces. If there's additional space needed, it's just bolt on, but it is, and we'd have to dig into it a little bit deeper, but they are selling these across the country. They're dealing with cities that have taken this up, that have worked their way through all of the issues. This isn't new. We're not going to be the first ones doing this by any means. So we're not reinventing the wheel by any stretch of the imagination. I personally don't care for the K-rails or the pallet built,
They're so.
those types of things. Those
Not
are very
safe.
temporary and tacky, but I think there are ways to, in a unified, classy way, do something in between the very expensive hardscape.
And maybe we think about doing something like that in an alleyway, not where there's a lot of traffic
Sure, but an
downtown.
alleyway is a roadway, and Bierman Alley is the one we immediately think
Right.
of. But there are delivery vans coming down that, there are businesses
Right.
whose private parking spaces are back there. And so how do you just shut
Well,
that
but it's
down?
this-
I wasn't necessarily talking about Bierman,
But it's the same thing. So now instead we're taking it away from the public and we're exposing, I just think they're bigger. I think they're bigger issues than just like, it's a cool idea. It is a cool idea. I think it needs a lot more vetting by a lot. I think it's bigger than one.
I like your idea. I like that a lot. So I think maybe we should just wait and see if we get the grant. And then when we do our downtown plan, incorporate that. But there is going to have to be a conversation about the particular.
Oh, I'll handle that. But I do think, look, at the end of the day, we wouldn't expect a business to invest, a substantial amount of money to
Right.
create one of these if they didn't have a surety that it was going to be
That it was
sort of
gonna be
a long
right,
term.
That makes perfect sense.
I think that's fair.
Okay. All right. So are we good with that? Like, we don't, this isn't a top priority for you right now.
Okay, and I'm here.
Let's look into it.
Yeah, look into
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
and I'll
but-
make sure, I feel very good about this grant, so we'll just
Okay.
have that be part of the work.
Awesome. Good, good, good. Okay, thank you for that very much. Okay, item 11, council initiated business. Anybody have business? Well, I would like to request and ask how to handle it. I would like the council to have a conversation about the planning commission. So is that something that we do in closed session or is that open meeting?
I think we'll have to look a little deeper into it and see if there is a basis for closed session, but otherwise we can do it at an open meeting as well.
So once you decide that, can we get that on the agenda if I have support? I think it needs to be dealt with. I think it's an issue that needs to be dealt with.
Certainly. There are also commission appointments that are coming up
It's true.
relatively quickly.
There are, but let me say this. There have been challenges with other planning commissioners over the years. We've had discussions privately. We've addressed those issues with the individuals, given them an opportunity
I'm
to
fine with that.
correct. It didn't come here and it wasn't a broadcast, massive public conversation.
Well, I could be wrong, but I think there was an effort to communicate with them and they haven't responded yet. So I'm happy to give them the opportunity. I'm totally fine with that. I just want the council to understand that it's not an issue about the item itself. It was how the public was treated.
I understand.
So-
And I will watch the tape.
Please do.
I'm hearing from the city.
So maybe
manager.
I'll retract my thing and ask you to watch it if you haven't watched it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And then take into consideration the comments that you heard. Because as a council member, let alone the mayor, I don't want to be represented like that. Not at all. We don't talk to people like that. So, Dan, did you have a comment? Question?
But yeah, initiate business somehow handle.
Yep, exactly. That's fine. I was just asking what the appropriate method was.
I was gonna say, I agree with handling it. Don't know that it needs to be an agendized item, to your point. I think that we have the authority and the roots to handle it how we want, yeah.
Asking what the proper way was.
Yeah.
We can't allow public comment. We're done with that. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Item number 12, information items. I just wanted to remind everybody that the Kiwanis Children's Health Fair is coming up on, not this Sunday, but next Sunday, on the 9th, at Glen Edwards Middle School from 11 to 3. So we'll be out there with the city tent and helping with that. So I just want to remind you if you want to stop by.
And Mayor, did you were going to mention, I think, open house at the library? Is that this Saturday?
Oh, that's
On the
October
1st.
1st, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Whitney, what time is it?
Yes. Thank you. 5 to 7. And
I'm going to hand my information item over to Richard
Yeah, there you go.
and jump up here, Richard,
for
if you
the,
would, and talk about
for
the airport.
open house. Very
Yeah.
good. Thank you.
There's no advertising during information items.
This is, so don't advertise, just give really good information.
I'll just give information. So October 8th, the open house is going on as planned. We've got 65 to
So
70.
what open house and where?
The Lincoln Airport Open House Day. From 7:30 in the morning, we're looking to have hot air balloons lift off and then do the balloon thing and go somewhere. We'll have a hot air balloon doing tethered rides in the, within the confines of the airport itself. I said we're gonna have 65 plus or minus specialty aircraft out there. We'll do some flybys. We're expecting a lot of people out there. It's free to the public. No, there's no charge for for entrance. There's no charge for parking. So we want the people, the community from whole South Placer to come out and have a great time, experience the airport, show why aviation is important to our community and how the airport itself can be part of an integration within the whole South Placer region. So everything's going according to schedule right now. So we're looking forward to a great day. I think we can guarantee perfect weather.
Oh,
Yes, there will be food. There'll have food trucks out there.
Guarantee perfect weather. I'm gonna hold you to that.
Yeah.
just not gonna work.
Thank you,
The
Richard.
balloons are going to require it.
Okay, so library open house, what is it, the 15th year anniversary? Is that what? 15th, that's okay.
anniversary, yeah.
That'll be fun. So October 1st, 5 to 7. Then October 9th or October 8th, the airport open house, which is gonna be a lot of fun. And then the next day is the health fair at the middle school. Anything else? Okay, awesome. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you, staff. We are adjourned.
And it's still 3 minutes to 6 according to the clock.
So it starts at 11.